I call this meeting of Township High School District 211 Board of Education to order. May we have a roll call, please?
Ms. Cavill,
Here.
Mr. Kramer,
Here.
Mr. Dombrowski,
Here.
Mrs. Klimkowitz,
Here.
Mr. Rosenblum,
Here.
Mr. Young,
Here.
Mr. Lefevre.
Here. Governor Pritzker recently extended the disaster declaration related to the COVID-19 pandemic for all Illinois counties. Based on the current public health concerns, the board president of Township High School District 211, as head of the public body, has determined that it is neither practical nor prudent to hold an in-person meeting of the Board of Education on December 10th, 2020. The Board of Education meeting will be remote and will comply with the procedures set forth in Public Act 101-640. The board president further finds that the public health concerns render in-person attendance of the public or a member of the public body, chief legal counsel, or chief administrative officer at the regular meeting location not feasible. Through our roll call, we verified that the Board of Education can hear one another. Would everyone please rise and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, our first item of business is closed session. We have a suggested motion that the board will enter closed session to discuss minutes of meetings lawfully closed under the Open Meetings Act, appointment, employment, compensation, discipline, performance, or dismissal of specific employees, and probable or imminent litigation against, affecting, or on behalf of the public body. Can someone please move that?
So moved. Second.
Roll call, please.
Ms. Cavill,
Aye.
Mr. Kramer,
Aye.
Mr. Dombrowski,
Aye.
Mrs. Klimkowitz,
Aye.
Mr. Rosenblum,
Aye.
Mr. Young,
Aye.
Mr. Lefevre.
Aye. All right. Session, can someone please move that?
So moved.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Ms. Cavill,
Aye.
Mr. Kramer,
Aye.
Mr. Dombrowski,
Aye.
Mrs. Klimkowitz,
Aye.
Mr. Rosenblum,
Aye.
Mr. Young, Mr. Lefevre.
Aye. All right, next item of business tonight is recognitions for that.
I believe, Mr. President, I believe Mr. Young is in the attendees list and not the panelists list. I think he may have selected the incorrect link.
Okay, probably someone can get in contact with him outside of the meeting and we can continue with the recognition piece.
Mr. Kovac, if you could turn off your camera and take care of that, please. Thank you. Tonight, we will recognize our athletes who were award winners from last spring, including our Illinois Senior Gymnast of the Year, as well as our Fremd High School girls basketball team who won the 2020 state championship. So right now I will turn it over to Kathy, who will share a screen for this awards presentation that we have.
Board of Education and Dr. Small, thank you for taking some time tonight to recognize a gymnast and a truly exceptional basketball team. I know this is not how we normally recognize athletes, but I know myself and these athletes really appreciate finally getting their opportunity to be recognized for their accomplishments last year. So let's go ahead and get started. Anthony Avella is a member of the English department at Conant High School and has been teaching for 11 years. For the last 10 years, Anthony has been coaching gymnastics, the last 6 as the head girls gymnastics coach at Conant High School. In 2017, Anthony's teams qualified for the state gymnastics tournament, and Anthony has had a qualifier each of the last 6 years in the individual state tournament. Anthony is here to talk about one of the gymnasts he had from last year.
Okay, hello, my name is Coach Anthony Avella. I'm the head girls gymnastics coach at Conant High School. And I wanna take a moment to thank the board and Dr. Small for recognizing Julia Betts. graduated from Kona High School last year, and recognizing her accomplishments as a gymnast at Kona High School. Julia's impact at Kona was felt immediately her freshman year. She came in as one of our top gymnasts, and she was a major part in our lineup to help us make it to state that year, which Kona High School hadn't done in 10 years. And as a freshman, I remember Julia standing out immediately. And she was an all-arounder for us that year. And it really was a great season, a great year. And I am happy I got to experience that season with that team and with Julia. And, I remember thinking specifically with Julia, she was going to be just a standout gymnast for us for the next 3 years. And unfortunately, her sophomore year, she suffered a foot injury, and it sidelined her for most of that season. And her sophomore year didn't quite end the way she or I wanted it to. But Julia came back from that injury, and she came back strong. And again, unfortunately, she had to face more adversity. She was in a fairly serious car accident that kept her out of the gym for quite some time. And thankfully, she was able to walk away from that car accident. But she suffered some pretty serious injuries. And I did not think that Julia was going to come back to gymnastics after it because she was severely injured. But she did. She came back from that injury her junior year, and she almost qualified to sectionals as an all-arounder. And I remember thinking that was such an incredible comeback by Julia. And her senior year, I really wanted to help her make it to state, to end her gymnastics career the same way she started it at Kona High School at the state meet. But just unfortunately, it didn't happen. She made so many improvements from junior year to senior year. And I really thought that she had a strong chance of making it to state. And she missed making it to the state meet by 1/4 of a point. And as heartbreaking as that was for Julia and me, I remember thinking, as a coach, I kind of failed her in a way, kind of let her down because she didn't make it to state when I thought that she had such a strong chance of doing so, considering all of the setbacks and adversity she had to overcome. But looking back in her career as a gymnast, all 4 years, I really can't really call that a failure because Julia really did mean a lot to Kona Gymnastics and her team over the course of 4 years. Up and above just her talent as a gymnast, she was a great leader, she was a great teammate, and she's just a nice kid to be around in the gym. And I think it makes sense that Julia was selected and nominated by the IHSA as the Senior Gymnast of the Year. She was nominated and selected as a recipient for the Kim Noonan Award at Kona High School. And I think it's these qualities that make up Julia of just being a strong leader and a good teammate and a hard worker and just being determined that it was not only recognized by her teammates and myself as her coach, but it was recognized by other coaches and other judges in the state, in the IHSA. So I'm proud of Julia and all that she was able to accomplish. And she was one of the top gymnasts to come through Kona High School, absolutely. And I am proud of her accomplishments and all that she was able to do.
Now let's move on to the Fremd girls basketball team. Dave Yates is the head girls basketball coach at Fremd High School, and he's also the math department chair. Dave is a familiar face here at the board meetings. His teams have finished in the top 4 in state 4 out of the last 6 years. In 2015 and 16, you might remember that Dave's teams finished 2nd in state, and in 2017 they finished 4th. Dave capped last season with a 30-7 record and becoming the first MSL West girls basketball team to win the state championship when they defeated Lincoln Way West 58-47. Coincidentally, that was actually the last state championship that the IHSA has awarded since the pandemic.
First of all, I'd like to thank the Board of Education for all your support during the year and for the many, many years that you've supported our program. I do want to give a special shout out to board member Ed Young, who makes it to most of our games. We really appreciate your support, Ed. I also want to thank our former superintendent, Dan Cates, who came to a number of our games and stopped by one of our practices before we went to state. We appreciate your support. I also want to thank the Fremd administration, including Mr. Teneper and Mr. Dick, for all the support we get. We're very fortunate to have leaders in our building that support athletics to the degree that they do. Let me start out by recognizing and kind of giving you, telling our story. I want to start with our team as a whole. We had 16 members and we had 11 seniors on the team this year. That's pretty unheard of on most rosters. We had a very deep, experienced, and balanced team. This was as close as a team as I've coached in my career. A lot of these girls made personal sacrifices that were made in terms of giving up individual recognition for the better of the team. This team has 9 girls who are continuing on to play athletics at the college level. I also want to mention our amazing parents. Your support of the team, regardless of your child's role, made this a very special season. I want to thank our coaching staff. Their tireless work behind the scenes is rarely recognized, but I'm truly blessed to have one of the best coaching staffs around. Just to kind of give you a summary of our season, our team played one of the toughest schedules in the state to prepare us for the playoffs. We played 5 of the top 6 teams in the Chicagoland area, as well as some of the top teams from Indiana, Tennessee, and Kentucky. We had a very successful regular season, but some untimely injuries never really allowed us to play at full strength for most of the season. Despite that, we still won the MSL West Championship with a 10-0 record, and kind of heading into the end of the season, we ended up playing the defending state champion Maine West in our final regular season game of the year. To be honest with you, in that game, that's kind of the starting point of what kind of ended up our magical season. We were embarrassed. We got beat by 17 points, and 17 points doesn't really shed light on how bad they beat us in that game. We had played a lot of games that month and we were running on fumes, but it also gave us a rallying cry for the rest of the season. When we met as a team following that game, the team felt like we showed no fight and vowed to not let that happen again, and they didn't. I think every team has a pivotal moment in their season, and this was ours. The reality was that if we played like that again, our season was going to be over. What happened over the next 7 games was amazing. We went into several games as the underdog, and that didn't seem to matter to our girls. Our experience and our ability to rise to the occasion played out over and over again. We won the MSL championship game by defending the number 1 seeded team in our sectional, Hersey, in the championship game. We were down most of the game, but the girls showed the fight that they thought was missing from the previous game, and we pulled it out at the end. After winning the regional championship, we defeated the number 2 seed in the sectional, Libertyville, in a very competitive game. That set up a rematch with Lake Forest. Lake Forest was a team that the previous year we lost to them in the sectional championship game. It was a crushing loss for our team, and it basically served as a motivator throughout the offseason for our kids to get that opportunity to play in that game again. Our team ended up winning the sectional championship in another hard-fought game, which meant we would move on to the Elite 8, which would give us a rematch with defending state champions from Maine West. The game was held at Kona High School in an absolutely packed gym. It was a super sectional game. To be honest with you, a lot of people came to this game to see Maine West run us out of the gym and be on their way to their next state championship. Our team came out and put together one of the best halves of basketball, and we had a large lead going into halftime. Maine West was not going to go down without a fight. In one of the crazier fourth quarters I've coached, we saw a double-digit lead evaporate, and it looked like momentum would carry Maine West to a comeback victory. Maine West got our lead down to 2 points with minutes left, but we dug down deep and made some big plays down the end to pull out a victory. This is one of the biggest upsets in the history of our program. Our girls deserve all the credit. Their mental toughness and ability to perform at their best against the best with all eyes on them, both on TV and in front of a packed gym, tells you all you need to know about this group. In our first game downstate, we beat Lake Park in a game that was very close early, but we managed to pull away late. During our last 4 games of the season, we defeated a team that had a member of the first team All-State team. We proved that throughout this run that our team was always greater than an individual. Between games, we ran into the only other Frems girls basketball coach in the history of our school, Hall of Famer Carol Plodzine. I asked Carol to say a few words to our team. It was very cool to see our girls introduce themselves to a legend and for our girls to hear how far girls basketball has come along from somebody who had been around at the beginning of girls basketball in the state of Illinois. Up next was a championship game versus a very good Lincoln Way West team. We got behind early, and I think nerves had a lot to do with that. Some huge three-pointers to close out the half brought us back in a very close game. The game continued back and forth until we did what we seem to do every game during the playoff run. We put together some scores and stops and just slowly grew our lead to the point where we knew the game was won. And as the final horn sounded, I think it finally set in for our girls that we had won the state championship. The team ended up winning 30 games and tying a school record for wins. We also became the first MSL West team, as well as the first District 211 girls basketball team to win a state championship. My favorite memory about this group and the run we went on to win state was the following. We never stated as a team that it was a goal to win state or to make it downstate. The approach we took was that each game we won gave a very close group of girls the chance to practice one more time, as well as hang out as a team together. They didn't want it to end and proceeded to make history along the way. This group truly cared about each other and valued being part of something bigger than themselves. Thank you. Coach Maddie Young, Coach Courtney Ludis, Coach Steve Hernandez, Coach James Hahn, our manager, Audrey Klink, who's attending Kansas University, sophomore, Anna Schmidt, junior, Kate Beckemeyer, junior, Hannah Mahmood, junior, Grace Labarge, who is all conference, all area, IBCA third team all state, and she's committed to play Division I basketball at Quinnipiac University. Junior, Ruthie Montello, who was a captain. She's committed to play basketball at Division I William and Mary College. Senior, Eleanor Klink, who's currently playing basketball at Augustana College. Senior, Grace Cox, who's currently a student at Missouri. Senior, Liz Prigge, who's currently playing soccer at Wisconsin Whitewater. Senior, Kendall Maloney, who's currently a student at Marquette University. Senior, Allie Prigge, who's currently playing soccer at Wisconsin Whitewater. Senior, Allie Sheehan, who's currently a student at University of Illinois. Senior, Katie Hansen, who's currently playing basketball at Hamilton College. Senior, Caroline Cochran, who is a captain and is currently a student at Dayton University. Senior, Ella Burns, who is the state of Illinois Queen of the Hill three-point shooting champion. She won the 4A state championship for three-point shooting and then beat every other girl in 1A, 2A, and 3A in a shoot-off to be the Illinois state champion. She is currently a student at Notre Dame. Senior, Olivia Hill, is currently playing basketball at Division I Bowling Green. Olivia was two-time All-Conference, two-time All-Area, and IBCA All-State Special Mention. Senior, Emily Klazak, who's currently playing basketball at Division I University of Alabama, Birmingham, or UAB. She was first team IBCA All-State, second team AP All-State, three-time All-Conference, three-time All-Area, and three-time MSL Player of the Year.
It is my pleasure to announce that we just received word last week that head girls basketball coach Dave Yates has been named the 2019-2020 Illinois Girls Basketball Coach of the Year by the National Federation of State High School Associations. Dave has been the head Vikings girls basketball coach for the past 14 years, and during that time, he's amassed an impressive 328 wins with only 115 losses. He has led the girls to 11 Mid-Suburban League West Division titles, 7 MSL championships, and 4 state tournaments appearances, just as we've heard tonight, including our district's first girls state basketball championship. On behalf of the Board of Education and Friend High School, I'd like to congratulate Dave Yates on this well-deserved award.
Congratulations. All right, I believe that concludes the recognition portion of our meeting. We'll now continue on with the business portion. The next item on our agenda is public comments and hearings. First tonight, we have the public comment portion. Governor Pritzker recently extended the disaster declaration related to the COVID-19 pandemic for all Illinois counties. Based on the current public health concerns, the board president of Township High School District 211, as head of the public body, has determined that it is neither practical nor prudent to hold an in-person meeting of the Board of Education on December 10th, 2020. The Board of Education meeting will be remote and will comply with all the procedures set forth in Public Act 101-640. The board president further finds that the public health concerns render in-person attendance of the public or a member of the public body, chief legal counsel, or chief administrative officer at the regular meeting location not feasible. Tonight, public comments will be via Zoom. Individuals who wanted to address the board via Zoom were asked to sign up today between the hours of 4:30 p.m. and 7 p.m. If more than 20 people completed the link to address the board, a random system was used to select and order 30 names. Since public comment is to be heard for a maximum of 1 hour, not all 30 people may have a chance to address the board. A list of individuals who will address the board and the order of the individuals addressing the board was posted on the Zoom meeting screen at 7:15 p.m. Each person who addresses the board will have a maximum of 5 minutes to speak. You will be told when you have 1 minute remaining, though you may not hear that if you are speaking via Zoom. Public comment will be heard for a maximum of 1 hour. I will call the name of each individual when it is their time to speak. Individuals speaking via Zoom will have their ability to address the board turned on by a district administrator when the person's name is announced by the board president. The individual will need to turn on their microphone at the conclusion of their comments. The microphone will be turned off. Please state your name for the record, and if you wish, indicate if you are a resident of the district. When you are finished, your microphone will be turned off. Any individual's unused time or place in order may not be deferred to another individual. All right, first person tonight will be Glenn Volkemer.
Hello, my name is Glenn Volkemer. I'm a resident of the district. I want to express my feelings towards getting both students and teachers back into the classroom. With respect to the students, I feel we need to get a significant number of students back into the classroom to foster a motivating learning environment for our children, as well as our teachers. We have mounting evidence that students are not learning as effectively, are having emotional and behavioral issues, and are becoming complacent about school. We also have mounting evidence that COVID health risks to people under 65 are far less to those over 65. So I feel the damage being done by not being in school is overwhelming the risks of being in school. Again, I feel we must get the momentum going to get students back into the classroom. With respect to the teachers, I recognize that health risks to the teachers is generally far greater than the health risk to the students due to their age. I understand the position of the teachers union to advise teachers with serious concerns to utilize the current system to obtain provision from returning to school. However, I feel we need to consider more drastic measures to adapt to this situation. Every working person, almost every working person, is faced with this same problem. Businesses are turning to people that are willing to keep their businesses going. If a teacher is unwilling to return to the classroom, perhaps you must seek a substitute who will. I perceive there are ample number of dedicated and passionate teachers willing to teach in the school under these conditions. In these conditions. So far, the vast majority of my children's teachers are willing to be in school, so I don't believe the numbers are insurmountable. I feel for the teachers and students who cannot return to the classroom, but we cannot continue to sacrifice properly teaching our children. Thank you.
All right, thank you. The next person will be Kristen Steele.
There we go. Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. Good evening. I'm Kristen Steele, taxpayer and parent to a child in District 211. I want to start by speaking tonight with this statement. The D211 school board is not doing their job. There seems to be several reasons that this may contribute to this. One of them being the lack of ability of oversight from the board to the superintendent, as well as the lack of communication between the superintendent and the Board of Education. To be clear, the school board is a nonpartisan position elected by the community. As the entity legally charged with governing a school district, our school board is responsible to the community to govern efficiently and effectively. The superintendent serves as the board's chief advisor on educational matters and as the district's educational leader. The superintendent should ensure sufficient information is provided to the board so it is able to make informed decisions and evaluate the results of those decisions. Boards that micromanage are working outside of their policy-making rule, and superintendents who macromanage are superseding the governance role of the school board. It has been made very clear that this is happening here at 211. The board is complacent and frankly has their hands tied in representing the community because the resolution passed in July, which gave Dr. Small the sole authority to act on behalf of the community. In October, Mr. Kramer brought up modifying this portion of the resolution, and board president would only opine to the agenda items that Dr. Small deems fit. This went to a vote and it was voted down to not even be on the November agenda for discussion. I'm demanding that this is both discussed and modified as soon as possible. It is no secret that one of the holdups to our kids being in school is staffing. While I do not know all of those intricacies, I do know that the teachers union is very much not in favor of in-person learning. As a matter of fact, there is even a private Facebook group, which was started in July, called Local 1211 Takes Action, where the admin is actually one of my daughter's teachers. Just by the name alone, seems it is about taking action against in-person learning. It's a private group, so I am not certain, but that's just the feeling that I get. On the same topic, an email from Teachers Union 1211 president was sent to Dr. Small approximately 1 week ago, which makes it clear that in-person learning is not favored by the teachers, the essential workers who have chosen a career path to educate our young people. The email is somewhat inaccurate because Mr. Braglia references return to hybrid learning as a board's decision. It was not the board's decision, as I explained above, it was Dr. Small's decision. I would like to read that email. Dr. Small, the board's decision to return students to a hybrid model for 9 days prior to the winter break, still within the quarantine window from Thanksgiving break, to schools absent of central office administrators and school board members is not prudent nor responsible. This position seems hypocritical in light of today's decision to shift curriculum committee meetings from in-person to the Ad Center to Zoom meetings. The board's decision to curtail the adaptive pause seems to be absent of any scientific support and appears to reflect ulterior motives. The D211 staff is not responsible for the COVID virus, and furthermore, we are extremely unhappy with not being able to teach and work with students in person. However, the compromise the health and safety of the entire staff during a temporary downward trend in metrics, even though the death count in Illinois hit an all-time high this week, seems reckless. Therefore, I am recommending all staff with serious concerns about returning to school put in for a work schedule modification, i.e. the provision that allows people to work remotely or as a result of living with or caring for someone with an underlying condition or medical accommodation. Eligibility of medical accommodation.
You have 1 minute left.
includes physical and emotional issues, hypertension, diabetes. I will instruct staff to utilize the current system in place through human resources to obtain one of these provisions, which includes securing necessary documentation from their physicians and therapists to then contact D211 Human Resources. I will skip forward. As far as the pre-approval travel announcement that you sent out today, you and I never discussed this. It was never negotiated between the board and the union, and therefore is not recognized by the union. In fact, I don't even believe it is legal. I will skip forward again. I look forward to working with you, as we have in the past, towards developing a plan to return our students to a normal school experience without compromising the health and safety of our staff. Thank you.
Thank you. Next will be Karen Powers.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Good evening. My name is Karen Powers. I am a sophomore at Hoffman Estates High School. Last month, I addressed the board about teachers disregarding IDPH guidelines to travel over the Thanksgiving holiday. Little did I know you were going to put our district that had approximately 15% in-person capacity on an adaptive pause. Dr. Small, I read the agenda for this evening's meeting, and you will be announcing that the first 7 days of the second semester will be remote. I ask you why. Do you have a crystal ball? You insist that you are following metrics, but there is no way of knowing what they will be 4 weeks from now. Is it once again a staffing issue because the teachers are choosing to ignore the IDPH guidelines? This week, I saw an email sent to Dr. Small by the president of the teachers union, John Braglia. It was a scathing email in direct opposition to reopening schools after the adaptive pause. He falls short of telling the staff to do whatever it takes to stay home, advising staff to answer all daily wellness screening prompts with strict interpretation. Specifically, if a staff member is anxious or concerned about their own health and well-being, they need to respond to the following prompts honestly. The examples are anxiety-induced headaches, stomach pain, extreme fatigue, etc. Mr. Braglia, if you are listening, you should visit the homes of the students you and your staff are supposed to be teaching, and you will see the examples you are referring to, along with depression and isolation. I'm one parent suffering from anxiety-induced headaches, stomach pain, and extreme fatigue. I don't need a daily wellness screening to tell me there are many others like me. They're not as vocal, and that too is disappointing. Mr. Braglia's email solidifies what I have said at numerous meetings. It's the union, and they don't care about our kids. Which leads to my next question. What does the union want? What's the ransom? You are the only profession not back to work. What makes you so special? Union firefighters and union police officers are working and have been since March. They can't remotely fight a fire or arrest a criminal. I'm having trouble wrapping my head around teachers being fearful of a virus with a 99% survivability rate, but are willing to protect the very same students from a school shooter with a 50% survivability rate. You are paid to teach your students, and you're not doing it. You're doing your profession and reputations a great disservice. I know there are great teachers out there, and I'm sick and tired of hearing about how they want to go back to the classroom, but can't express it to their union. Why? It is absurd. Teachers don't want to teach hybrid. My daughter attended in-person learning this week only to be told by her teacher, who was in the classroom, not a sub, to log into the Zoom because she was the only student in class. That's not how hybrid is supposed to work. The district spent taxpayer dollars training these teachers on how to teach the hybrid model. Dr. Small and board members, hybrid isn't working and full remote is worse. It's time to return to full in-person learning every day. The CDC has said it is safe for children to attend school. Countless studies have shown COVID is not being transmitted within schools. Therapeutics are available and a vaccine is expected to be released before the end of the year. On July 1st, Dr. Small assumed the role of superintendent, and 15 days later, this board unanimously passed a resolution giving her sole power in regards to which learning model D211 will use at any given time. She has absolutely no oversight. It is time for this board to address the resolution. It needs to be revised or completely removed. Every single one of you have failed my child and the 12,000 others who attend this school district. I have seen Mr. Kramer actively speak at meetings offering ideas to get our children back in the classroom. He proposed an amendment
You
to
have
the
1 minute left.
aforementioned resolution, and Mr. Lefebvre wouldn't even put it on the November agenda. Mr. Dombrowski, having children attending D211 schools, I wish you were more vocal at meetings. Mrs. Klimkowitz, you are a licensed professional counselor, and you have shared that you have grandchildren attending school in person in Texas, but you've done nothing for the students of D211. You voted against having Mr. Kramer's proposed amendment added to the agenda. I would like to know why. It does not take a licensed professional counselor to see the devastating effects remote and hybrid learning are having. The long-term effects of anxiety, isolation, depression will forever change our children. We are reaching a critical stage, a point of no return. Our children are the forgotten victims of COVID. I would like to remind you, suicide has a 0 survivability rate and a domino effect on everyone around them. Thank you.
Thank you. Next will be Denise Wilson.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, I'm Denise Wilson. I'm a citizen of Hoffman Estates and taxpayer for 211. Since I've been attending these meetings, there's been very little movement to address the public questions and concerns. The taxpayers are funding the school district and are entitled to have our questions and concerns addressed. This board has, for some reason, given the superintendent the full responsibility in the resolution COVID-19 2020-2021 school year opening plan dated 7/16/20. This is unacceptable. And when a member of this board requested to add a review of this item to the agenda, it was voted to not even take the time to review different options. This is not the openness that we, the people who fund you, require. I sent a letter earlier this year regarding the quality of our e-learning. My position was and still is that the e-learning is not working. I was told since there was no test results, we would have to wait. Since there is now test results, please report on the progress of our students. Attendance for both teacher and student for in-person is a concern. When students come into the classroom, why is it okay for teachers to remain at home? Why are we calling it in-person learning if the teachers are not required to come in person? It is very hard for the students to see the value of in-person learning if they are just Zooming from their desk in the school building. In-person for both students and teachers needs to return with the start of this January. There is no reason for this not to happen. I will end this with, as a taxpayer for District 211, I find it totally unacceptable that you are talking about increasing our taxes for the quality of education that you are providing. There is absolutely no reason for any tax increase. This district has no debt and you are selling property that gives you a large amount of return. This needs to be reconsidered and changed. Thank you.
Thank you. The next person is Sophia Steele.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Good evening. My name is Sophia Steele and I attend Hoffman Estates High School. And as many of you already know, I've spoken many times at the board meetings. The level of frustration me and my classmates have has only gotten worse. Students are so frustrated from no sports and no school. We had 3 weeks of in-person learning. That's it. However, because of the way we are split up, it was only 1 week for some. Students were so excited to go back. They were posting on social media that it's so good to see faces again and to hold actual conversations about life. Just when it got a little better, we got an email that cases were rising and we had to go back to remote. My teachers told me we weren't going back to school for the rest of the semester. So I got a job at the Park District to help kids with special needs with e-learning. I can go into the Park District with 15 kids in a classroom and help them with online school, but none of us can go into our own personal school. I was 1 week into my job and we received another email saying we are going to be going back in the last 2 weeks of school. All the students were communicating. Why? We all received communication that we weren't going back until after the first of the year, and now we are. It makes no sense. It's so frustrating. My friends went back into school this past week, and with my parents, we decided I will continue to help my special needs students. They all said it's a ghost town. Why go into school when a single teacher isn't there? In some of my classes, teachers were asking me why I wasn't in class when they were sitting at their kitchen table. I'm getting reprimanded for not being in class when they can't even show up. Now, hardly any kids go into school. They simply don't care anymore. Motivation and desire to do anything is gone. I was fortunate to have tryouts for competitive dance in November. My team and I had the best week ever together. And then sure enough, we got another email saying that dance would be virtual. The last day we were in person together, we all read the email together and sobbed. We cried with masks on. It was so upsetting. Our team then had the opportunity to do an in-person performance outside for the holidays. Finally, something we can work towards and be together. We have worked hard these last couple days and weeks preparing routines for this event. And sure enough, we joined the Zoom yesterday and the coaches told us they had some bad news, that the event was no longer happening and the guidelines were under review. We're outside with masks on and social distance and we still couldn't do it. We are willing to freeze our butts off and perform together. We just want to be together. We are excited for the community event, something fun. My point is, the communication has been the bare minimum and is extremely confusing. It's fine one day and the next day it isn't, and then the next day it is. Students have lost all motivation to do anything. We don't care about grades anymore. For some, keeping grades up is solely based on the privilege of sports, and that's gone. Students just don't care anymore. And I applaud any teacher for getting the students' attention because we've all lost it. I hope the board revisits the decision of coming back in January, because if we aren't going to school in the beginning, you're going to lose us again, even more than you already have. Thank you.
Thank you. Next person is Mark Pachalski.
Let me unmute myself. Okay, I'm muted. You all hear me now?
We can, thank you.
Thank you, okay. After reviewing the previous Board of Education meeting discussions, specifically regarding the proposed levy extension of 2.74%, I was quite disappointed that the previous and current board members and District 211 leadership had blindly, let me repeat that the current board leadership and current board members and previous had blindly accepted skewed financial projections presented by the District 211 administration. A board member commented during the previous meeting that the excessive levy extensions exceeded the historical inflation rate since 2010, which burdened the taxpayers with an additional $14 million. District 211 continues to operate financially in a self-centered, often selfish environment. The economic strain of the pandemic, which has resulted in hundreds of thousands of people to be laid off or furloughed. Many units of government have furloughed or laid off workers and did everything possible not to increase taxes. They did so because they took into consideration the taxpayers, the citizens who are suffering financially. District 211 has a very healthy surplus. The administration and possibly the Board of BOE leadership will tell the board members that if the district does not levy to the allowable limit, there will be a terrible, terrible compounded revenue loss that can never be recouped. Really? And you have this big surplus sitting around. Has anybody on the board looked at the compounding losses the taxpayers have incurred due to the excessive levy extensions? I urge the board not to vote for the 2.74 levy extension and suggest that a board member make a motion countering the 2.74% levy extension with a lower levy extension of perhaps 1%, maybe 1.25%. that would be a reasonable compromise. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Stacy Gale.
Hello?
We can hear you. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Stacy Gale, and I'm a resident of Hoffman Estates, parent of a D211 student. I have some questions for Superintendent Small and the Board of Education. I realize the board and administration do not typically answer public comments during the board meeting, but I hope the board members will share my concerns and ask the questions during the discussion of the 2021 plans. I recently read multiple emails from Union President John Braglia to union members and Superintendent Small, in which he referenced negotiations between the union, the administration, and the Board of Education. At the November meeting, Superintendent Small stated there had been no new negotiations with the union. Who is telling the truth? Mr. Braglia or Superintendent Small? Was a member of the board part of the negotiations as well? And if so, who? According to the contract, teachers must teach 5 classes and serve 1 supervisory period. Please explain how teachers are serving their supervisory period. In November, Superintendent Small said teachers could voluntarily sub for a coworker working remotely from home. Couldn't the required supervisory period be utilized to alleviate the operational difficulties by requiring the teachers to supervise a class where a teacher is remote? This would eliminate the need for a substitute and eliminate the expense for the taxpayer for a substitute teacher. Please explain, hold on. Why you will be delaying in-person learning opportunities for students when the Cook County Department of Public Health said on the conference call on December 8th that it is safe for schools to be open. You are happy to keep schools closed and blame it on Cook County Department of Public Health, explaining why you are now recommending going against their findings. Cook County Department of Public Health said it is safe for schools to be open. They have approved your mitigation controls. Why wouldn't you listen to them now? The District 54 superintendent at his board meeting tonight said he has a standing conference call on Tuesdays and Thursdays with Cook County Department of Health and other superintendents, including Lisa Small. And in those meetings this week, the most important question that was asked was, is it safe to have students in school this year or right now? And he said, yes. The health department confirmed it is safe for students to be in school now. The schools could open safely tomorrow. I'm sorry, I lost my place here. The information in the agenda states you plan to begin with the first 7 days remote. Based on your staff email, you are looking to accommodate, Dr. Small, this is addressed to you. You are looking to accommodate staff who chose to travel despite IDPH and CDC recommendations against travel. Students should not continue to pay the price for teachers disregarding IDPH guidelines. If you insist on delaying in-person learning, then cancel spring break, extend the winter break. This will eliminate the negative impact on students' education by reducing the number of remote-only days. It will also eliminate the potential of a renewed anxiety, headaches, stomach aches, and an additional adaptive pause.
You have 1 minute left.
Due to travel quarantine requirements. In closing, I want to share a few stories with you. On December 2nd, around 11 a.m., a 6th grade boy in Woodridge, California turned off his camera, muted himself during his remote learning class, and shot himself in the head. His sister was in the other room remote learning and made the grisly discovery after she and her class heard the gunshot. On December 4th, 16-year-old Spencer Smith of Brunswick, Maine, committed suicide. He left a note writing about feeling locked in his home and growing apart from his friends. In mid-November, a 16-year-old boy in Zeeland, Michigan committed suicide, and a week later, a 15-year-old boy in Hamilton, Michigan took his own life. On October 20th, 14-year-old Michael took his own life after spiraling into depression because of being isolated from school and friends. His story is heartbreaking. Last month, 15 students from Mason.
Time has ended.
Thank you. That concludes the public comment portion of our meeting. The next item on our agenda is the public hearing on the proposed 2020 tax levy. We have a suggested motion that the public hearing on the proposed 2020 tax levy of Township High School District 211 is now open. Can someone please move that?
So moved.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Ms. Cavill,
Aye.
Mr. Creamer,
Aye.
Mr. Dombrowski,
Aye.
Mrs. Klimkowitz,
Aye.
Mr. Rosenblum,
Aye.
Mr. Young, Mr. Lefevre.
Aye. Does someone want to reach out to Mr. Young about his microphone?
I'm here. It's aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so the hearing is now open. Tonight, comments on the proposed 2020 levy will be via Zoom. Individuals who wanted to address the board via Zoom were asked to sign up today between the hours of 4:30 p.m. and 7 p.m. No one signed up to address the Board of Education. We now have a suggested motion that the public hearing on the proposed 2020 tax levy of Township High School District 211 is now closed. Can someone please move that?
So moved.
We want to get a second
Second.
and roll call, please.
Ms. Cavill,
Aye.
Mr. Creamer,
Aye.
Mr. Dombrowski,
Aye.
Mrs. Klimkowitz,
Aye.
Mr. Rosenblum,
Aye.
Mr. Young,
Aye.
Mr. Lefevre.
Aye. All right, that will bring us to presentations, for which we have nothing tonight. And then to our consent agenda. We have a suggested motion that the consent agenda be approved as presented. Can someone please move that?
So moved. Second.
Thank you. Any discussion?
Yeah, just a quick question. I wanted to compare the October variance report with this year from last year. I was able to do that. The one from the previous year I could not find. The comment is that for this year, as of October 31st, 2020, there is a net surplus of almost $5.6 million. And a year ago, there was a surplus of $438,000. That's a big difference. Can someone explain to me why it's so large this year as compared to last year? Keeping in mind that at the end of last year, we ended up with around a $4.5 million surplus.
When looking at the October 2020 variance report, I do not have the last year's in front of me, but I can provide you with some information on the variance this year. Specifically on the revenue, our local property tax revenue is the greatest area of variance compared to our budget. When we are comparing to our budget, it's our budget to that particular date. So it would be through October 31st, 2020. You can see that there are various areas that are unfavorable in our revenue as well. When looking at our expenses, we have a favorable variance in almost every category. This is largely due to the fact that when our budget was developed, we were developing for our traditional school year as it was planned at the time, with a start in a hybrid scenario. We are seeing some favorable positions. However, we did provide some information to the board last week, which provided information that in many of these categories that we anticipate that while they are favorable at this point in the year, that they will become less favorable or on budget as the year continues. In particular, some of our capital spending, our benefits, and anticipate that our salaries will as we are in hybrid for second semester.
So you anticipate, and I know it's a crystal ball, that the current surplus will become less than it is right now based on staying in hybrid, full in person, remote. I know it's a crystal ball, but
I do anticipate that many of these line items will become, or the various categories of both revenue and expenditures will smooth out over the remainder of the year. In our February budget and finance meeting, we will be providing the board, the budget and finance committee with an update on our financial projection, which will look at where we are with 6 months of our revenue and expenditures for the year relative to our learning plans that we've had and just trends that we're seeing in our various categories. So that will provide an updated position as to where we are with more months of data at that time.
yeah, thank you for the explanation. Looking forward to the February meeting. Thank you.
All right, if there are no other questions, roll call, please.
Ms. Cavill,
Aye.
Mr. Creamer,
Aye.
Mr. Dombrowski,
Aye.
Mrs. Klimkowitz,
Aye.
Mr. Rosenblum,
Aye.
Mr. Young,
Aye.
Mr. LaFever.
Aye. That will bring us to special reports. First, we have the Freedom of Information Act request. If there are no questions here, that will bring us to our 2020-2021 school year update. Dr. Small, would you like to make any comments here?
Yes. So Monday, the hybrid scenario began for the final 2 weeks prior to the end of semester. The number of students were about 1/3 of expected in-person students compared to the 2/3 of students that we had back in October. As indicated in the report, the number of COVID-related cases began to increase the beginning of November and continued throughout the month and into December. To that end, our ability to provide a consistent day of opportunities to the in-person students is currently limited. In that report, I have detailed the start for second semester. This plan allows for District 211 to mitigate for any COVID employee issues from winter break within the first 7 days of school, starting with a more fully operational hybrid scenario on the 8th day, allowing for families, whether they be employees or at home, to plan for this, faculty to plan more efficiently for the start of the school year within their classrooms, and for schools to implement a more effective and full hybrid scenario. During the first 7 days of school, students will be able to schedule for appointments for academic supports, whether they want to come in person or remotely. And ideally, by that time, the state mitigations will have changed to allow for our in-person athletics to occur. And we would certainly support that as soon as that's allowed by the IHSA, the ISBE, and the IDPH.
Anyone have any questions for Dr. Small?
I have some comments that I'd like
Sure.
to provide regarding the later start. Merriam-Webster.com defines anarchy as an absence of government. This board's failure to act is grossly irresponsible. We have sat here since July with ample opportunity to prioritize the needs of our students. We have walked through a mob of our angry neighbors, read and responded to emails from educated local health professionals, and stoically stared deadpan into the eyes of mothers, fathers, and children begging us to follow the science. These people elected us as their representatives. We have abdicated our responsibilities and allowed our school district to descend in anarchy. Our students must have an in-person option on January 7th. Eleanor Roosevelt is quoted as saying, "The purpose of life is to live it, to taste experience to the utmost, to reach out eagerly and without fear for newer and richer experience." Do we encourage our children to take classes that are safe so as to not risk their academic records? Should we discourage participation in AP and dual credit classes because there is a risk that a GPA might be tarnished? Does success simply require meeting the absolute minimum expectation? Or should there be a desire to exceed expectations, even with faced with extreme difficulty? The hybrid learning plan is a farce. It minimizes education. Students are isolated in rooms with neither peer nor teacher. This was not the scenario presented prior to the start of the school year. Our parents have lost faith in our district. They ask why one half of the school is receiving 3 weeks of in-person opportunity and the other is receiving 2 weeks. They ask why one school has a building full of staff and the other is nearly empty or void of teachers. They ask why 3 weeks on, 3 weeks off, 2 weeks on. They ask why all the uncertainty. Parents reach out frustrated that they cannot afford to send their children to private in-person schools after paying their property taxes. They demand that we provide an exceptional education that will open their potential. Our students must have an in-person option on January 7th. Nothing in life is to be feared. It is only to be understood. Now is the time to understand more so that we may fear less. Those are the words of Marie Curie. We have allowed our district to grind to a halt. It's irresponsible and reprehensible. This is meant to shame everyone here. I bear responsibility that I was not a stronger advocate for our children earlier in this process. My house is not regularly filled with the sound of a trumpet or a baritone. The last 2 semesters of band classes have not been a great boon for my children. I spy the screens during class, and I see many black boxes filled with silence. There is minimal dialogue and engagement. I'm not sure why Infinite Campus has a boilerplate comment that should ever include students should seek academic support available in the school. I sent my child. Staff were kind of surprised to see him. Our students must have in-person option on January 7th. George Orwell wrote in 1984, how does one man assert his power over another, Winston? Winston thought, by making him suffer, he said. We are suffering. We cannot continue to suffer while hiding behind the anarchy of other agencies. The Illinois State Board of Education issued clarification on November 20th, 2020, clarifying within the frequently asked questions, do the Tier 3 resurgence mitigation measures established by Executive Order 2020-73 apply to schools? The answer is that Tier 3 mitigation measures do not apply to instructional activities at school. These measures do not apply to indoor staff, or they do apply to indoor staff and teacher meetings. The requirements for meetings and events state that indoor venues and meeting spaces such as meeting rooms, banquet centers, private party rooms, private clubs, country clubs, and party buses are prohibited from hosting gatherings of any size. At no time has the CDC suggested schools should be closed, said CDC Director Robert Redfield last month. All schools should remain open. It is the safest place for children to be, he said. It's safe to keep schools open, said Dr. Daniel Johnson, Chief of Pediatric Infectious Diseases at the University of Chicago Medical Center. And the vast majority of public and private schools in the Chicago area that have reopened in some capacity this fall have had little confirmed exposure to the coronavirus in the past month, according to the Chicago Sun-Times analysis of state data. There is no justification within the July 16th 2020 resolution, Township High School District 211, 2022-2021 school year COVID-19 plan to start the next semester remotely. Our students must have an in-person option on January 7th. Starting the second semester any other way would be simply unacceptable. Those are my comments. Thank you.
Mr. President, to Mark Kramer, I have a question, and I don't expect an answer now. They had to do with metrics. It's clear from to me from members of the community that after we went into the pause, we went into the pause for 3 weeks, and now we're back into hybrid. That a lot of teachers are not there, and that a lot of students end up who are in the hybrid mode going to the cafeteria to do Zoom. Dr. Small, can you perhaps next week provide some metrics? And I want to thank you for your lengthy explanation on FFCRA. I did not know that federal program existed. I'm sure that you mentioned it sometime, but can you quantify, say next week to the board, how many teachers are taking who are using the FFCRA 2-week additional leave? How many are using the 12-week additional leave? And again, I don't remember the names of the other programs. There's FMLA, and that maybe 2 or 3 others. And then there's also, and I don't know if it's an agreement or practice for a teacher who believes that they or has been exposed to COVID is allowed to operate teach from home rather than come in person to teach hybrid. If you could quantify those four, there's probably 5 different categories, so we can see what the short straw actually looks like. I mean, I don't know how many teachers are in the school. Is it 25% teaching there? Yeah, again, that's a rhetorical question. But if you could provide those metrics to the board at sometime next week, I would be appreciative, and I think the other board members would be too. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments?
I do have a couple of questions. We're looking to have January 5th and January 6th at Institute Days. Will we have any of the teachers at the schools, or is it all Zoom? How are we looking to do the Institute Days?
The teachers will be in place on January 5th and 6th, as long as we are allowed to have our faculty meetings. If we are not allowed to have our faculty meetings, they may be changed to Zoom. The faculty meetings that Mr. Dombrowski did quote from the ISBE is based on the Tier 3 mitigations. If the Tier 3 mitigations change by then we'll be able to hold those in person with grouping faculty meetings.
Okay, but the teachers know that their expectation is, if it's an Institute Day, they need to be there.
That's correct.
Okay, so if we were able to be within the school, then they would have to plan accordingly, which they probably should, to be there physically if they can be physically present.
Yes.
I guess the way I'm going at, taking a look at this, what I would really like to see happen is that, January 11th, start the week with our students in school. Is there any possibility of back to school for all of our students, maybe starting that week?
When you say all of our students, what are you referencing?
I guess I'm saying, instead of the remote learning or the hybrid, can we get all of our students back into our schools? What's the criteria? What would allow us to do that?
We cannot follow the IDPH and the Cook County guidelines if we opened our doors to all of our students to come for in-person learning. We would not be able to maintain those guidelines for a 100% in-person learning schedule.
We don't have the space for, so
okay.
I mean, you couldn't social distance at that point to any point. If we're talking about all of our kids being back in the building, I mean, you can't, there'll be no social distancing in any area, common area or classroom. It's just not possible. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. But if we go to the hybrid, can we not start the hybrid the week of January 11th?
If we started the week of the hybrid January 11th, based on what happened on the return after Thanksgiving, and I will not qualify this as all travel, the significant number of people that we had come back who had symptoms or positive cases is what's causing us not to be able to fully staff. And that's the information I've been sending to the board in terms of, there are certainly metrics that we watch, but there's also our ability for our licensed and our non-licensed people to run the hybrid at the expectations we have for that.
But again, our resolution from July did not, it was contingent on following guidelines and recommendations from the agencies that were listed in the resolution. There's nothing in there about staff shortages.
It talks about the plan, and the plan is the detailed presentation that came forth in July that indicated all the metrics that not only incurred the health metrics, but also the operational metrics that are detailed within that. The operational metrics include the licensed and the non-licensed personnel. It also includes our PPE, our ability to disinfect. Those are part of the operational metrics that we look at.
And if we were to start on January 7th, as Ms. Klimkowitz is suggesting, or even January 11th, and we have a shortage of staff, what is the consequences of staff not being able to come in to meet their responsibilities?
The consequences is we have kids coming at a hybrid where they are not able to go to a classroom, they're going to a study hall.
Dr. Small, the consequences to the staff, not the students.
If the staff cannot come in, if they are on a quarantine as dictated by the IDPH or the Cook County. So they can't, they have to have some particular setup, whether it be that they have a symptom, they're COVID positive, they have close contact. Those are the set things that we have always gone through.
Right. So if they engage that quarantine action, they would be home on leave and they would not be working remotely from home. Is that correct?
It depends on the position of the employee.
I have a real quick question in relation to this. So correct me if I'm wrong, Dr. Small, but the reason that we may not have enough staff, and I have some other questions and comments too, but as a follow-up to this, the reason we may not have enough staff is not because teachers would be showing symptoms, having been in contact, or other IDPH reasons for not attending school. The reason that they would not be able to come in is potentially because they traveled, and as a result of travel, which is a voluntary choice that they are making, now they cannot come back to school on time, correct?
That is one of the IDPH and Cook County stipulations, but the other items that you listed are reasons why they cannot come to school. So
I understand that. If they're sick, showing symptoms, tested positive, or were exposed, those may or may not be their choosing. Certainly, showing symptoms or testing positive is probably not their choice. But if a teacher decided to travel to an area that they are advised not to travel, and they so choose to do so voluntarily, now we're saying that because of that, we're having a staffing shortage. That's my first question. And as a result, not able to return to school on time. And secondly, are we unable, in instances where we don't have enough teachers and licensed staff, are we unable to staff the classroom with unlicensed teachers? So at least the students can be in a classroom with their peers, albeit maybe learning on Zoom, but there's someone there with them and other students allowed to be present and not send them to a study hall or elsewhere.
I'll answer the second question first. Currently, we are not able to fully staff, whether it's licensed or unlicensed, 100% of our classrooms. So in this hybrid scenario that we are in right now, there are sometimes certain periods that students cannot go into the classroom because we do not have a person to put in there for them. That is a combination of the items that you listed prior to that, which includes the higher number of symptoms, positive cases. Travel is also in the mix, but I do not want to tell you that it is all travel. The number of positive cases and symptoms still continues to rise, and we saw that continue when we returned from Thanksgiving.
Comment, if I could, Steve, Mr. Rosenblatt, just a comment that
Sure.
It's along the same things. Do we ask for a doctor's note or a COVID test in order for someone to come off of quarantine? I mean, it seems like an option is, okay, option one is, I think I was exposed to somebody, I got a quarantine for 2 weeks. Isn't there a policy somewhere that says, okay, if you think you have, you're not going to get the 2 weeks unless you get a doctor's order that says you need to be quarantined for 2 weeks? Is it an individual decision or is it a doctor's decision?
Mark, I'm going to let you answer that piece. We have a set series of guidelines that we follow that are given to us by the IDPH and is communicated with the Cook County Department of Public Health.
Right. There's a very strict exclusion guidance document that the Cook County Department of Health has provided to us. It has different categories of reasons why people would be excluded from attendance at school. It applies both to students and to staff members. For example, a person might be considered a close contact of a confirmed case. Person might be considered a positive case themselves. Each different scenario has a different outcome attached to it. And in the case of a positive test or a close contact scenario, before the person can be readmitted to the school, it's required that they be cleared by the county health department through a release letter that that agency issues.
Well, are doctors, are medical tests it part of the process, or is it bureaucratic? It's very confusing, and it seems like an impossible criteria to get through, and it leaves it almost entirely at the discretion of the employee rather than the employer. Sorry, Mr. Rosenblum, I think I was along the same lines that you were asking. I appreciate the time.
Mr. Kramer, in some cases, a doctor is involved. There are times when an employee or a student is trying to verify that there is an underlying condition other than COVID that is responsible for symptoms they're experiencing. And if a doctor is able to verify that, that can lessen the time that a person is kept out of school.
So as a follow-up to Mr. Kramer's earlier request for data and metrics, maybe, I'm not sure if I missed it or if it hasn't been issued yet. Is there information regarding the number of students seeking to be in person starting of next semester? Has that data been fully pulled together and shared yet?
Mark, can you give us a update on that?
Yes, so we have the survey results from the recent inquiry. We're processing those and hope to have that completed soon so that we can reevaluate the team structures that would be in place for the second semester.
Can that information be shared with the board by Monday, please?
I don't want to commit to a date, Mr. Rosenblum, because I don't want to let you down, but we are working as quickly as we can to get that process.
Okay. My other question is, I'm going to go back to, sorry for harping on this, the voluntary decision of staff to travel. Okay. I'd like to know, as a follow-up to Mr. Dombrowski, his question regarding, I think it was Mr. Dombrowski, repercussions to the teachers for making those voluntary decisions. That's my first question. That is now going to put us at a staff shortage situation. And number two, do you have data that shows the number of teachers, maybe they're telling you, maybe they're not, telling you in advance that they are planning to travel and as a result will be unable to start class on the first day of the semester?
So that is the part of the current system that is not in place, that does not give us any warning that teachers are going to travel. So teachers are not required to tell, currently not required to tell us in advance, which then puts us in a, it makes it more difficult for us to staff, because then when they return, that is when we know. And that is part of what we're trying to change for the upcoming semester, so that we know in advance when they're going to travel.
So your decision to possibly postpone the beginning of the semester is based on the historical percentage or number of staff that may have traveled for Thanksgiving. Is that correct?
It's the number of staff that were not available to work after Thanksgiving, which was not solely due to travel. The numbers that we have given to the Cook County Department of Public Health, and during the conversations that I've had with them, our employee base is mimicking the community in terms of the number of positives and the number of people that we have out. It is not solely based nor fully based on travel. Our employee group right now is not healthy. That's why we have a higher number of people that are out, and that's why we're unable to fill our positions within our schools the way we'd like to for a full-fledged hybrid as we had planned.
So we really can't determine yet, because we don't have the full data from the surveys, to determine if, say, for instance, right now, if we took a snapshot of our staffing situation, we don't know, based on the number of students that that have responded to the survey that they would like to come back in person. We don't know, even if we took a snapshot of our staff today, because we don't have the student data to determine whether or not we have enough staff to return right away, correct?
We have to fill every room. If we're running a hybrid scenario, we have to have an in-person adults in every room to run it the way it's expected.
And I'd like to echo that the expectation of most parents in the community is that we have the hybrid model as presented back in July. We're not there. We're falling well short of that. And to make a point, if 10% of our staff in the past 3 months, if we've had 10% of staff reflecting community infection rate and they've recovered, we should have 30% of staff that are no longer vulnerable to reinfection as far as the data goes.
I wish we were seeing that occur, but we're not.
I'd like
So,
to concur.
so are you stating then that we're below what the community rate is from the county?
No, I don't have an actual rate. What I said was the Cook County Department of Public Health says that our increase in our numbers with our staff mimics what the community is seeing in increases.
I guess I
The
have.
county did not give me an exact number.
So Mrs. Klimkowitz, real quick before you go, I'd like to mimic Mrs. Klimkowitz's request, thoughts, desire to have our students return to school at least in the hybrid model at the beginning of the semester, and not delay that even a week if we needed to. Thank you.
You know, I take a look at the expectations. If our staff knows that what their job is of teaching in the classroom, and that's the expectation that we've presented, then they probably should do as people who are currently working in areas that are high need and people have to be at those offices or fire department or police department. You do what you need to do to make sure that you're available to work. So that's why I really feel strongly, if there's any way that we can get our students back to the hybrid model and start off a solid week, that week of January 11th, because our expectation needs to be communicated that the teacher should be there, and hopefully when the teacher is in the classroom, more of the students that, you know, within the guidelines will be in the classroom. Because I was really concerned when we get a comment that there was just one student there with the teacher. That shouldn't be, and I don't know why that was, but I would like to ask, if at all possible, that we can start the hybrid model the week of January 11th.
And I want to be very open and frank here too. I am very upset, as are many members of our community, that that staff is willing to travel during the holiday season. My family has canceled more than one trip over this holiday season because of employment situations. And because of the health and safety of people involved, both from our family's perspective as well as those that we may be visiting. And I think that our teachers need to think of the same, and think of their employment situation, the needs of the community, the needs of our students, to be able to properly staff our schools. And if they're making voluntary decisions that put that in jeopardy, I'm not at all pleased with that, not at all. And I think that that needs to be evaluated. I think that the individuals involved need to consider that. And they need to take steps like I have to mitigate any such situations from happening with our community.
I've got a couple of things to say. I just want to be really quick. I can understand the frustration of the community members, myself, fellow board members. I understand the frustration. I think it's pretty obvious that the administration shares the same frustration with this entire situation. But let's just be really clear. We can't fire teachers for traveling. Like we can't. We can't, that's not a fireable offense. We can't fire somebody for traveling. We also can't force teachers not to travel. Do we wish we could do either of those things? That's a whole nother issue, but we can't. I mean, we could try and pass a policy saying those things, and that policy would get challenged immediately and thrown out. That's not within our power as an employer. We can't say to our staff, you are not allowed to do this outside of your workout. You can't travel, even during this terrible situation. Now, I join Mr. Rosenblum's feelings because I'm in the same situation. We've canceled everything, including very important family visits to myself. And I really regret having to do that, but that's what I had to do. And I certainly hope that all of our teachers and administrators and every member of our community does whatever is in their power to get the community transmission rate down, which is, according to our administration, more than partially responsible for the staffing shortages that we are having. Okay, so even if we said that the consequences for voluntary travel with teachers that we're going to disagree with doing actions like that, if we say, well, your consequences, you have to come into work, like we're not going to grant you, we're going to say all of a sudden that you can't use your sick leave that you're entitled, or we've decided that therefore we're going to revoke any federally granted leave that you've applied for and we've granted up till then the consequences is saying to that person, okay, we're unhappy with your actions, so now go into our schools and potentially spread infection. So I don't see that as a particularly desirable consequence either. It comes with a risk to the health situation that we're trying to diminish in order to provide the amount of services that we can. As to the overall issue of, other places in the world or other states in the union or seem to be able to do this, it's cherry picking facts. We have Texas that keeps being brought up, and Texas schools are having to close as well for the same kind of health metric problems we're currently experiencing. Schools in Ohio are dealing with the same thing. Schools in France are dealing with the same thing. Now, we do know from those studies that people like to quote that 4 things matter in terms of keeping our schools safe. And those are the 4 things confirmed by the CDC. Those 4 things are very clear. It's improved ventilation, which we did in the spring to the best of our ability. It is bubbling students and staff. That is very, very difficult to do in a high school situation because, of course, each teacher teaches a single subject. It's much easier to do that at the elementary level when you have one teacher with one set of kids and they can just stay together. Okay, but you need to bubble students and staff so that you can accommodate the social distancing measures, okay, which are necessary to keep people safe. Then, whenever there's a positive result within that bubble, the entire bubble quarantines for 2 weeks, 10 days, depending on where you live. That's no questions asked. Then they're returning to in-person. And of course, the 4th tier of that is mandatory masking, which we've implemented. Okay, so we need to be really, really clear about what the CDC is actually saying when they're saying that schools are safe and when they're saying the Illinois Department of Public Health is saying that too. And remember, there's not just one piece like saying, okay, our students are safe in school. Fantastic. But we need to have the staff to put them in the school. And, to the gentleman who commented in public comments before that he was sure that we had plenty of substitutes. That wasn't the case before the pandemic. It's absolutely not the case now. And it's not the case just in this district. It's not the case pretty much nationwide. We can't find subs. That's been true from the beginning. We've been transparent about that from the beginning. The administration has been telling us that from the beginning. We discussed last time the possibility of mandating teachers to act as substitutes, which many of them already do. I myself work as a program aide, and I myself substitute, even though I'm not even getting the pay that's required to do that, because that's what teachers do, they pitch in. But again, with the way that the schedule is set up, the only way that a policy like that would really help is if we had a time machine and could somehow inject afternoon time into morning instructional time. Doesn't make any sense. So I think that because we can't fire teachers for traveling, even though some of us may wish we could, and we don't have, as an employer, the power to tell teachers that they can't travel as much as we wish they didn't, and the potential consequences that we are within our power to enforce, which is to say, you have to come to school, that might potentially spread more infection that we're trying to reduce. I think that that's why Dr. Small is trying to say, you know what, we're going to start remote those 7 days. We're going to build in an organized buffer so I can plan for it and make sure everybody is absolutely ready to go on such and such a date.
I'd like to follow up on that.
I'm sorry, I'm not completely done. I'm happy to hear what you have to say. Just hold on. So I think that we just have to continue balancing these two pieces. We need to get as many students in person as possible with the hybrid scenario, because the hybrid scenario is the only one that allows us to accommodate the necessary fundamentals of keeping school safe in this kind of situation until the mitigation efforts that we discussed originally in the summer, including a vaccine or some widely available treatment that, you know, gets rid of the need for these mitigations, as well as the very, very difficult project of actually staffing in a district as large as ours. Like, we have to balance, there's two working pieces of the puzzle. And so I know it's very frustrating, but that's why I support the plan as it's presented.
So we have a role as a Board of Education to our community. And the discussion that we're having to keep this on track is, do we want to accommodate the teachers by delaying the start of the school because we're concerned that the staff may not be there? Or do we want to prioritize our students and make a strategic directive that says we want to hold a start date where our students have the opportunity to return to school on December 7th or December 11th? And that's really the discussion that I believe this board was having. And I think we may have gotten lost and off track on the minutia regarding possibly how that might be accomplished. But that's really an operational issue that would extend beyond the purview of this board. So back to what Ms. Klimkowitz and Mr. Rosenblum were stating, I think it's our goal to prioritize the students and to have them in the buildings as soon as possible. And that should be the expectation that this board, with the priority of education, makes that statement. And that is really where this is driving to. I understand Dr. Small's concern with having operational challenges, getting staff in there, but to preemptively put our students on the back burner because we're concerned that we might not have enough staff due to whatever they're doing over the holidays, that's not my concern. They have, some teachers may have available 340 days of sick time to use. We have a provision in our contract for 2 weeks of quarantine that they're allowed to take. There's plenty of metrics in here that will trigger, obviously, after December 31st. So I think some of that has to play out, but from my seat as a board member, I think it's our role to reflect the community's expectations that our students have a place available if it's hybrid, because of the requirements from the Illinois State Board of Education, where we can't really have more than 50 people here or there. That's fine, but they've made it clear that tier 3 mitigations do not have an impact on instruction. So I don't believe that we should be preemptively moving in that direction at this time.
I understand. My question is, if we instituted such a directive, which I agree with in principle, then what happens when that day rolls around and you don't have enough staff to open? Because I can tell you what happens in other districts that we've seen. They have to announce a same-day closure. because you can't have students sitting in a room without an adult. So a directive, fine, but that doesn't magically make staff appear. And again, I want to reiterate for accuracy's sake, we're not just talking about staff out due to travel. We're talking about staff out sick or quarantine because the community transmission rates are incredibly high. They're more than double what they were when we were talking about the same situation back in October. So that's my follow-up question.
And that's a good one. But I'm just wondering, it could be happening right now. We can have teachers on Monday, a bunch of them calling in sick, which puts us in the same position. And we're currently in our hybrid model. So it could happen at any time. But I think, at least from my perspective, the teachers know our start date. I would like to think that they will do everything in their power to stay safe, to be able to meet our expectation of being in the schools. Would 1 week earlier of the hybrid model make a difference? I honestly don't know, but if we can start it sooner, I think that's better. Because when you look at it, the kids are going to be out of school for 2 weeks for their winter break, probably even a little bit longer than 2 weeks because we've got institute days. So I think there's an urgency, get them back in as soon as we possibly can into our hybrid model.
I share the urgency. I just think the urgency runs up against practical realities and expectations, especially when we're talking not about the flu. We're talking about an illness that once it's run through the contract tracing systems, oftentimes results in a quarantine that lasts up to 14 days. And one that makes a person who is positive highly infectious for at least 5 days before the positive result on average.
Mrs. Cabell, you're not you're not a disease person, okay? It could be the flu, okay? Because the rules are if you have symptoms, you get to quarantine. You know, there's also a legal aspect to this. I'm not an attorney, and I don't believe Mrs. Cabell is either. Can you, Dr. Small, get us a written opinion by our attorneys on a scenario? And this is hypothetical. We say we are going to be in hybrid. Teacher, you need to be there in person. If a teacher does whatever, okay, can we, instead of letting them work from home for 2 weeks, require a test, and in fact, perhaps say, no, that the role is hybrid in person, take sick leave, a legal opinion, because that's how you apply and hold people to a policy which benefits the students and the community. It's if you could do that, I think that would clear up some gray area, which some people, if they understand, but maybe not entirely.
I may add 3 things to the conversation, please, and then I will step back again. My job is to make a recommendation to you based on the best situation I can put forward for this district. It encompasses the situation that we have available for our students, what we've experienced the past semester, what we've heard from some people on this call, as well as at other times of what students are experiencing, and the inconsistencies of what inconsistencies do when they think something's going to happen and it's not. The difference, first I want to address travel. Travel quarantine is following the Cook County Department of Public Health or the IDPH guidelines, depending on what situation we're in. If a teacher travels, I've been charged by this board to follow the Cook County Department of Public Health, the IDPH, and the ISB guidelines. If a teacher travels, they are on quarantine. That's, for me to say they're coming to school because even when they travel, means that this board has to tell me not to follow the Cook County Department of Public Health guidelines for that. The second piece behind the traveling, the quarantine, and sick leave. As much as I understand where people are coming from of the expectation of an employee, when an employee takes sick leave for 10 to 14 days, they are no longer connected to the classroom at all. That means I have to find a licensed sub to teach the classroom for 10 to 14 days. Now, all of these components are things that nobody likes. Nobody likes them. And the difference between January 7th, January 11th, and January 19th is the opportunity and the scenario we can come closer to for our kids. I do not have a crystal ball. I cannot predict it, but I can sure tell you if we start on January 19th, we have a significantly higher chance of setting forth a better environment for our students so that when they choose to come in person, we can hold school, we have enough staff, and by gosh, we should be able to cover pretty much every one of our classrooms, and if we can't, it's going to be the exception. If you back me up to the 11th or the 7th, I can no longer come close to saying that there's a good chance that can happen. What that means is it's a different opportunity. Right now, we have 150 to 270 students per school showing up in that type of environment compared to the 1,100 to about 1,100 we would expect for an in-person. It's very different right now. And what we're trying to do is set up an environment that our kids can be excited to come to because they know it's going to be consistent. And if we started on the 19th, my goal is that we keep rolling with this. Barring something unexpected, we keep rolling with this until we can change into a traditional schedule. Fingers crossed that that can happen before the school year ends. I don't know that it will, but it lends to consistency and people knowing what's coming.
Yeah.
If we don't have enough staff for me to open a building, whether it be for bus drivers, for custodians to disinfect, that school closes, and it closes on a dime because we cannot open it. And that does not send a consistent message of what I am trying to set forth for second semester from our students that is different from first semester. Learning from what happened in first semester and trying to come up with a plan that is going to take steps forward for better opportunities and understanding for our students for coming into school. I will step back now and let the discussion.
It's super small. You said something which keyed something in my mind. You know, worst case scenario, we're going to lose some time. We've lost a tremendous amount of time, which is unrecoverable. Can the academic calendar be changed such that we do not have a spring break and that we roll into the summer as far as we can, even if it bumps up against the next academic year? A day at the end added to the calendar for every day lost from now going forward. Is that possible? No spring break, no summer break. We go right through to make up lost time.
So when you say lost time, are you talking lost time in the building, lost time with no class to be made up? I'm confused as to what you're referring to as
right. Okay.
Time.
With the current proposal by the superintendent, we are going to have lost time, which is referred to as, I don't know, is it an academic pause? I don't know what we're going to call it. To delay the start of a hybrid by 2 weeks, is it? Okay. If that has to happen, add those 2 weeks. Let's make them up some other time. No spring break. We extend the academic year through May, through June, through July, to the beginning of the academic year next year. And if you got to start in September for academic year in the next out year, you do that. You got to finish this year.
Just to clarify, it is 7 days of remote learning, not 7 days of not doing any education.
Yeah, remote learning is no learning. It does not work. It does not work.
So, Mr. Kramer, from an academic perspective and a student and family perspective, to extend the school year at the end of the year is extremely compromising for students and their families.
So is COVID, Mr. Rosenblum. We're already at a losing game right now. We have to make up time. That's our responsibility.
Mr. Kramer, let me finish my comments, please. It's even more complicated for a senior student who may be going off to college, may be going off to summer program, starting somewhere else outside the area, outside the country. And it really makes things very, very complicated to extend the end of the school year. Now, I know that colleges and universities many of them have, that we know of, have eliminated their breaks for a variety of reasons, and mostly so that the students aren't coming and going with the virus situation and are going straight through to the end of the year. But I have personally seen the impact in other school districts that extending the academic calendar beyond what's already planned for our students and their families, especially for seniors who are making additional plans, for students who have summer employment opportunities or camp situations that they need to be prepared to go to come the end of school, and the negative impact, the further negative impact that it has on them. Certainly, our jobs are around education, but it gets much more complicated to a family and those students who we do have when we make changes to the calendar like that. So
so they don't have to play there, Mr. Rosenblum. I mean, it's a choice, and we need to give them a choice because they have not had a choice so far.
If I may jump in, I'm sorry. I think it's a creative thought. However, I don't think that's appropriate to this conversation right now. And I think we have to be really cautious because we do have students that are doing well and probably being successful academically, but yet we do have students that are really struggling and probably not. So these are things that, as we're going along, really will need to be evaluated, and maybe some special classes or things may need to be presented to the kids for summer school. So that's, I think, a good thought down the road. As for right now, there's no good answers for anything. I really want us to be in a good position to get our children back into the school. We've had some really good discussion. If Dr. Small feels that this is the best route that will get us back to the hybrid, and hopefully we will be able to get, maybe by the end of the year, maybe get all of our kids back in school next year, that would be tremendous. Dr. Small feels very strongly about this. You've made a presentation. We've had some really good discussion. I can support this, but we have to get our kids back hybrid with the time frame that you've got listed here, at least January 19th. No matter what, we've got to get them back in for the hybrid session.
Well, and
we heard tonight from a student who said that if you start remotely, you're going to lose us even more. I mean, to start remotely full out on data that we don't even have yet seems like we're giving up before we even tried. We should at least try to start when we were scheduled to, and if circumstances change, then so be it. But if the circumstances don't change or they become favorable, then we missed an opportunity. And at the beginning of the year, back in August, we started remote, and we didn't start as aggressively as the other districts. Then we started coming back and looking at the logistics. Then we started coming back, doing surveys. We were really slow to ramp up there. I think we missed opportunities in the first semester. And once bitten, twice shy. I'd hate to miss opportunities again in the second semester. And I can't support a delay without a real significant data-driven justification, and just basing it on, you know, some feelings from the Cook County Department of Health doesn't satisfy my need to support that.
I have one more comment, and I think this might be my last. We'll see. A couple things. One is I'd like to ask the administration to investigate that if we know that a teacher, if we know, you know, in the middle of break or at the beginning of break, that a teacher is most likely not going to be able to teach, can that class be considered remote? And I know that that's, you know, that, okay, now we have the kids in the class, in the school building, and how do we have, you know, 2 classes that are in person, 1 that's remote? How does that work? Or if we know that these classes are going to be remote, give that student instruction that they will be remote because they don't have teachers that week. And then when the teacher is able to come back, then those students, but there are going to be some students who their teachers are going to be in the class, in the building, and are going to be able to come back in the building and have that presence. That's my first thing. And second is, you know, we're making a lot of assumptions and a lot of discussions here right now, but a question I asked, I don't even know how long ago, was we don't have the student data. We don't know right now how many students and parents want to be in the buildings, right? What if it comes back that 25% of the student body wants to be in the building? What's that going to look like from a scheduling perspective? From a staffing perspective, that may be perfectly fine. And we may be able to accommodate that by combining some classes. You know, if there's similar classes, being able to do some rescheduling of that and making those accommodations so that we can get our students in the building. But right now, I don't think we have even the student data to make those assumptions. Thank you.
Okay. Appreciate everybody's comments about that and everybody's feelings.
I'm sorry, can I check that everybody can hear me, please?
Yep, we can hear you.
I got kicked off for a few minutes, so I just wanted to make sure that I was working okay. Thank you.
Okay. Our next special report is the Certificate of Excellence in Financial Reporting.
Mr. Lefebvre, before we leave this, I need
Yes.
to make sure that I have my marching orders here, that I need to move forward with the plan of opening on January 18th. I'm sorry, the 19th. I will do 7 days of remote learning with a hybrid starting on January the 19th.
Yes.
No.
Yes, you have my support.
You have my support.
Yeah, Mark Kramer, I would prefer to open as soon as possible and hybrid, what the calendar says.
I will support it if this is our only option that we can do. But if there's any signs that we can start hybrid sooner, if that would be possible, then I would like to see us do that.
Based on the information that we have at this exact moment, I'm fine with that plan, but I would like to ask the administration to share and analyze the information from the surveys as soon as possible to determine whether or not a change can be made to that plan.
Dr. Small, all clear?
Thank you.
Yep. And just to clarify, because we all support as soon as humanly possible, you're not opposed to that, Dr. Small, are you? You're just trying to provide the long-term stability and reliable schedule for people.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. I didn't think you were opposed to that. We all prefer that. You understand that we all prefer that. I think that's clear. Okay.
One last comment, Mr. Lefebvre. I'm really sorry. Is there any way that maybe we can send a note out to the teachers kind of reinforcing their importance and how important it is to get the students in, and just asking them to be cautious during this time, because our goal is to have everybody back in the school as soon as we can. I don't know if that's a possibility or not. I'll leave that up to Dr. Small, but maybe some kind of a note about our concern and our desires.
Absolutely. You want me to represent the board in that note? What would you like me to do?
I think you've heard our conversation. I'm representing the board.
I echo Ms. Klimkowitz's statement, and I'm sure that the board will hear about this, or the union will hear about the board's discussion, and will take every opportunity to review it. Every day when my children come home, I ask them how many teachers they had in their classroom, and I've been fortunate. I haven't shared the same experience as some teachers, but I would say that both of my students, when they go in, even if they're the only one in the classroom with the teacher, their teacher is there and available for them. And I'd like that opportunity for all of our students across all of our buildings. And that is the goal. And I want to thank every teacher that wakes up and comes into school and is there to meet in person my children and everyone's child. I think those teachers do a phenomenal job.
And we should convey that part of that gratitude in there also, and just that we're all working in this together, because this is totally different, odd, you know. Thank you.
Okay. That will bring us to the Certificate of Excellence in Financial Reporting. I don't know, Dr. Small, did you want to make any remarks here?
Yes, for the 13th year in a row, the District 211 Business Office has earned this award from the Association of School Business Officials International, recognizing the high quality and transparency of the comprehensive annual financial report, which is going to be presented to the board later on the agenda. I'd like to acknowledge the District 211 Business Office, as they have the skill set that allows the preparation of all the records for the CAFR prior to the independent audit of the CAFR. And that is not something that is typically seen across school districts.
All right. Thank you. Great work. I know Lauren is here, and I think Barb is also here. So thank you both for your work. All right, that will bring us to unfinished business. The first item, we have the adoption of the 2020 levy. We have a suggested motion that the Board of Education approve the amount of $241,690,000 as the 2020 levy of Township High School District 211. Can someone please move that?
So moved.
Second.
Discussion here.
Yes, I know that we had some discussion last month on it regarding inflation over the last 10 years. There's some confusion with the debt service that we included. So if we just look at the numbers from December of 2018 and the levy that we had passed, $228 million, $699,500. And we're going to $241,690,000. That's an increase of 5.68%. Inflation over that time was 3.68%. That's a 54% increase over the rate of inflation. Just consider that when we're approving this and how out of line that is with the cost of a loaf of bread. That's all I got.
Any other comments?
Yes, I have some comments. Investing in public education is investing in our community, and public schools represent a critical part of a functioning economy, as the pandemic so clearly demonstrates. I believe in the responsible management of community resources, and that's why I support the levy as presented. Earlier this fall, I asked the administration to include financial projections for a flat tax in public presentations about the levy, so that every member of the public could see the financial effects of underfunding our schools in future years. Other members of this board consistently describe a flat tax in non-specific terms like belt tightening, and rather than accurate terms like budget cuts. And they do this because belt tightening is a lot easier to sell to the public than budget cuts, staff layoffs, and reduction in services, which is what voting for a flat tax eventually results in. Voting for flat tax is like the crew of a financial Titanic voting to hit a budgetary iceberg. What starts out as a proportionately small leak grows over time into an unmanageable flood, resulting in a completely preventable financial disaster, only solved with teacher layoffs, steep budget cuts, or a public referendum. Losses we vote as a board to approve are never recoverable. They grow in perpetuity. A flat tax isn't belt tightening, it's fiscal absurdity. This year's budget is running at a $9 million deficit, and we're able to deal with it relatively seamlessly because of our reserves, built and maintained through careful financial stewardship over more than a decade. The pandemic has not just been a physical, mental, and emotional burden for our school community. It's been a financial burden too. It costs money to make sure our HVAC systems provide the best ventilation possible. It costs money to implement all the safety protocols required by the governor and recommended by the IDPH and IHSA. It costs money to make sure our digital networks can handle the demands of digital instruction. It costs money to purchase stores of personal protective equipment, transport students to and from the schools for afternoon appointments. District 211 has the financial resources to meet these additional demands, not because of dumb luck or non-existent government funding, but because of our financial reserves. Even when the pandemic ends, the after effects are likely to require additional financial resources to mitigate. We will be asked to do more as a district, as we've already started to discuss as a board tonight, not less, and doing more just doesn't come free. I support the levy as presented because it responsibly funds our public schools. And based on the information available to me at this time, I will also support the $2 million abatement when it comes before the board next year because it tightens our belt and properly balances the educational needs and the economic interests of our community. Thank you.
Any other comments? Roll call, please.
Mr. Dombrowski,
No.
Ms. Cavill,
Yes.
Mr. Young,
Yes.
Mr. Creamer,
No.
Mrs. Klimkowitz,
Aye.
Mr. Rosenblum,
Yes.
Mr. Lefevre,
Aye. All right, that motion carries. The next item of business is a proposed new policy non-discrimination statement. The board policy file, suggested motion is board policy file GAA, JAB, KAAB, non-discrimination statement be adopted as proposed and included in the board policy manual. Further, that the superintendent be directed to make appropriate distribution. Can someone please move that?
So moved.
Second.
Discussion?
Yeah.
Roll call.
Board members were involved in these policies that we're about to go over, correct?
Yes, Mrs. Klimkowitz and I both participate on the policy committee.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. I'm sorry, were there any other comments or discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Rosenblum,
Aye.
Mr. Creamer,
Aye.
Mrs. Klimkowitz,
Aye.
Mr. Young,
Aye.
Ms. Cavill,
Aye.
Mr. Dombrowski,
Aye.
Mr. Lefevre,
Aye. The next is the proposed policy deletion, non-discrimination of students and staff by students. The suggested motion is that the board policy file JFCM, non-discrimination of students and staff by students, be deleted as a board policy. Further, that the superintendent be directed to delete the policy from board docs. Can someone please move that?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion?
Our aren't policies archived rather than deleted in board docs?
Define what you mean by archived.
Okay, well, deleted means the whole thing is gone, never to be seen again. Archive means that it is no longer active, but what the policy was is still available. I think there are numerous former policies which are no longer active, which are part of board docs.
So we have a historical record of all of our formal policies, but you're correct. This deletion is indicating that the board is no longer keeping this as an active policy.
Yeah, I you know, it's a minor point. It's really not a deletion. We're resetting the policy. Okay, as long as there's a record of what the policy was before, that's all that matters to me.
There is a historical record.
Okay,
That's
thank
correct.
Yeah, under policies, the terms are active, draft, and retired. So I think it's not archived, but it's retired.
Yeah, okay, that's a better word, retired.
The context for, I think, some of the terminology probably would be that if in the past, if someone's came in and said, can I see the board policy manual? You would hand them a book that had all the active policies in it. You wouldn't give them stuff that were former policies unless they asked for it. But,
right, but you're right. It's still researchable. It's part of the record.
Yes.
That's all I'm concerned about.
Sure. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Any other remarks here? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Klimkowitz,
Aye.
Ms. Cavill,
Aye.
Mr. Dombrowski,
Aye.
Mr. Young,
Aye.
Mr. Kramer,
Aye.
Mr. Rosenblum,
Aye.
Mr. LaFever.
Aye. All right. Next will be the proposed policy revision, uniform grievance policy. The suggested motion is that board policy file GACJAKAA uniform grievance policy be revised as proposed and included in the board policy manual. Further, that the superintendent be directed to make appropriate distribution. Can someone please move that?
So moved.
Second.
Discussion here. Roll call, please.
Mr. Young,
Aye.
Mr. Rosenblum,
Aye.
Mr. Kramer,
Aye.
Cavill,
Aye.
Mr. Dombrowski,
Aye.
Mrs. Klimkowitz,
Aye.
Mr. LaFever.
Aye. All right, our next item is the proposed policy deletion, grievance procedure for sex discrimination. The suggested motion is that the board policy file GBMA, grievance procedure for sex discrimination, be deleted as a board policy. Further, that the superintendent be directed to delete the policy from board docs. Can someone please move that?
So moved.
Second.
Discussion here. Roll call, please.
Mr. Kramer,
Aye.
Ms. Cavill,
Aye.
Mr. Dombrowski,
Aye.
Mrs. Klimkowitz,
Aye.
Mr. Rosenblum,
Aye.
Mr. Young,
Aye.
Mr. LaFever.
Aye. Next will be the proposed policy revision, prohibition of harassment of or by students. The suggested motion is that board policy file JFJ GBC BB, prohibition of harassment, including sexual harassment, be revised as proposed and included in the board policy manual. Further, that the superintendent be directed to make appropriate distribution. Can someone please move that?
So moved.
Second.
Discussion. Roll call.
Mr. Dombrowski,
Aye.
Mr. Rosenblum,
Aye.
Mr. Young,
Aye.
Ms. Cavill,
Aye.
Mrs. Klimkowitz,
Aye.
Mr. Kramer,
Aye.
Mr. LaFever.
Aye. And that will bring us to the proposed policy deletion, prohibition of sexual harassment. The suggested motion is that the board policy file GBMBJFJK, prohibition of sexual harassment, be deleted as a board policy. Further, that the superintendent be directed to delete the policy from board docs. Can someone please move that?
So moved.
Second.
Discussion. Roll call, please.
Mrs. Klimkowitz,
Aye.
Mr. Creamer,
Aye.
Mr. Young,
Aye.
Ms. Cavill,
Aye.
Mr. Rosenblum,
Aye.
Mr. Dombrowski,
Aye.
Mr. LaFever,
Aye. And finally, proposed policy revision, prevention of and response to student bullying. The suggested motion is that board policy file JFCH, prevention of and response to student bullying, be revised as proposed and included in the board policy manual. Further, that the superintendent be directed to make appropriate distribution. Can someone please move that?
So moved.
Second.
Discussion. Roll call, please.
Ms. Cavill,
Aye.
Mr. Young,
Aye.
Mr. Dombrowski,
Aye.
Mr. Rosenblum,
Aye.
Mrs. Klimkowitz,
Aye.
Mr. Creamer,
Aye.
Mr. LaFever,
Aye. And that will bring us to new business. First item here, we have the 2019-2020 Comprehensive Annual Financial Report of Board of Education funds. The suggested motion is that the Board of Education acknowledges receipt of the June 30, 2020 Comprehensive Annual Financial Report, which includes the financial statements as prepared by Township High School District 211 and audited by Baker Tilly US LLP Certified Public Accountants. Can someone please move that?
So moved.
Second.
All right, and here we have Mike Malott from Baker Tilly. I guess we can turn it over to him and listen, and then if we have any questions, we can address him directly with those.
Yes, Michael Malott is our senior manager joining us from Baker Tilly US, and he will present to the Board of Education a brief review of the audit this evening and answer any questions that you might have. Michael, can you hear us?
Yeah, can you hear me?
We can.
Yes, welcome.
All right. Great. Well, thank you for having me tonight in this unique environment. So hopefully you hear me well. I will keep it relatively brief, but I do want to give you an overview of what we've accomplished this year through the 2020 audit process. Before I get into the details, I do want to thank Lauren, Barbara, and their team. Your district has arguably, or not really even arguably, the most professional business office. We work with really across almost all our clients. You kind of are blessed to have the depth of talent and the level of talent that you guys have in that business office. Compared to what we see in other districts, it's night and day, and it's something you should be proud of as a district and as a board, that you have such great support from them in their capabilities and their skills in the areas of finance. So again, one thing is we get into the audit, and some of the board members have heard me talk about this before, is that we come in like a tornado, ask a million questions, take up a lot of their time while they need to do their day jobs, and then we leave and tell them how the audit went. Without the finance teams, the business offices support and ability to quickly respond to us and provide everything we need, your audit does not get done in a timely fashion or in a quality fashion. Their ability to really aid us through the audit process to provide everything we need to do our job is essential. And just like every year, they've always been great at making sure we're able to do the best we can. This year in particular, with what was a completely remote audit, which is highly unusual and a total change of process, really it went off seamlessly. And that is a testament to their preparedness and their skill and their ability to support us in doing the job. So I just want to thank them before I get into the details, because it is something to be proud of as individuals in the business office and as a board, for knowing you have really good people working for you. So as I get into the audit, there are a number of things we do. The most obvious is going through and evaluating the accuracy in the presentation of the comprehensive annual financial report, which is your report of financial health for the year ending June 30th, 2020. In addition to that, we also evaluate a number of other items and provide a number of other opinions and report and levels of assurance. There's also the State Board of Education's annual financial report, which is a statutory requirement that we provide an opinion on. There is the single audit, in which we really beat up your federal awards on an annual basis, which you complete. There's also a financial and compliance report associated with your adult literacy programs that come through ICCB. Lastly, we also have some new requirements of the last couple of years from the state, from the GATA unit, which is the Grant Accountability and Transparency Act, and the unit that supports that act. And they have some financial reporting requirements, which is called the cipher. It's another layer of transparency and reporting required to the state of Illinois to basically provide them greater information on how money they pass through to local governments, including school districts, is being spent. So we do a lot in terms of what reports are out there. And the good thing is to report on all levels that we've given our highest level of assurance on all of these reports. For the comprehensive annual financial report, that's an unmodified opinion. That does not mean we look at every dollar and everything to a penny. The intent of that is to provide you with the highest level of comfort that we can in accordance with professional standards that says that the information presented is an accurate depiction of your financial health. It says as of that information, you can rely upon that to give you a good understanding of where things stand as of that date. So giving that level of assurance, that is the highest level we can get. It's a good thing. Not every district does get that. We do have what are called qualifications on a regular basis. So an unmodified opinion is not a rubber stamp. It requires us to beat up the numbers and provide a good evaluation and really make sure we're comfortable that those numbers are accurate, and they are. For the ISB annual financial report, we also provide an unmodified opinion associated with that. And one thing to note there is that your financial profile score is called recognition, and it's the highest level. It's a calculation that the state does as part of your financial performance for the year in your health to basically categorize district's financial profile as of that date. And the district, as they have in prior years, has the score of recognition, which is the highest score you can get. For the single audit, we evaluated 2 programs this year. The child nutrition cluster, which actually includes a number of programs, including the summer food program that was relatively new this year related to COVID and replacing some of the on-site lunch that was provided during the summer months and late spring. We evaluated that. We also looked at Title I funding. So those were 2 major programs that we looked at. It covered approximately 60%, I want to say, of your federal expenditures, federal awards during the year. So we evaluated a heavy percentage of that and had no findings related to either compliance or your oversight of those programs, which is great. And then for the ICCB report and the GATA cipher, we've had no findings to report related to that. We've provided our unmodified opinions on those, and we will, in a clean opinion, if you will, on those. So normally I don't get too much into numbers on the CAFR itself. We do, but I do want to point out a few highlights, just a few reminders. It's a big report. There's a lot of numbers and there's a lot of information. It's good information, but I know not everybody wants to read a 150-page report of numbers. So with that, if you have a moment to look, I always say the transmittal letter and the MD&A give you kind of your greatest bang for your buck on a summarization of what's happened during the year. There are 2, I guess I would call them kind of tandem components of the report. The transmittal letter provides a lot of kind of non-financial context in addition to some financial elements as well as to what's going on at the district. And the MD&A is a summarization of the financial results for the year. So everything that follows in the statements that we give our opinion on, the statements, the notes, the supplemental schedules, those all kind of get summarized in the management's discussion and analysis and provide some context for some of the things that happened during the year. So those are, kind of if you're going to pick and choose where to look at, those are 2 great spots to start. Additionally, the statistical section in the back, if you were looking for trend information, that is a good place to go. It provides a number of kind of 10-year lookouts or lookbacks, if you will, to a wide array of financial and demographic information. It's just a nice resource to have if you're ever looking to see how things have changed or in what direction they've been going over the last decade. That's where you would look for that. One thing to point out is it's been a bit of a disconnect from our perspective as auditors is looking at the COVID impact. Obviously, a massive impact for everybody in their lives. But from a financial impact on the fiscal year 20 financial statements, it did result in increased costs, but your funding, your revenue did not see any significant fluctuations as a result of that. Now, that will be something you will likely see in fiscal year 21, and I think you guys already have based upon the conversations I heard earlier. But in terms of this fiscal year 20 report, the impact from everything going on, while monumental, doesn't really present itself as drastically as you'd expect in fiscal year 20, and that's consistent with all of the districts we've audited. So you'll see the impact on that more great in fiscal year 21 than you will in fiscal year 20. So if you're looking for wild information associated with COVID, it's just not really there because the funding, the funding and the resources from the state and the federal government were kind of already earmarked. Private taxes were levied. Those impacts aren't going to hit you until fiscal year 21. Spending did go up, cost expenditures did increase. But that is your kind of your isolated impact from COVID for the fiscal year 20 financial statements. Some potential long-term impacts just to be aware of, in addition to long-term things such as potential reduced state funding, increased costs associated with just educating in a new environment and changes, everything you guys have spoken about earlier that you will see in fiscal year 21 and potentially even beyond is the availability of potentially a future stimulus package. We don't know how that's going, when it's going to hit. With the new administration coming in January, you could see some impacts from a positive perspective on that for the funding of the district. But you will likely see some reduced funding at the state level down the road as the state further has to tighten its belt, using a phrase from earlier, but to reduce and kind of keep a lot of the money that they collect in-house, if you will, to cover their deficits. That will see a downstream impact to local districts and local governments in time. So something to keep an eye out for. You won't see it in fiscal year 20, but it is some of the considerations in fiscal year 21 and beyond. On a positive note, though, your pension status, just to quickly summarize that, you're in relatively strong, I say not a relative, you're in strong position compared to other districts in Illinois. Your IMRF pension obligation isn't an obligation right now. It's actually reported as an asset. And what that means is that the current funding, the current assets set aside to fund future pension liabilities from IMRF is greater than the actuarial calculated liability, which is basically a present value calculation of how much you'll pay out over 100 years. What's important there to note is that by having more assets set aside for that in the fund, in the pension fund, is that money is going to work for you to further increase through investment income and investment earnings, further support those future pension benefits, meaning your contributions on an annual basis will decrease and be less than what other districts will see. So while the IMRF pension as a whole is very well funded across the board, you're ahead of the game in that regard. Is not everyone has an asset. A lot of them are in the 90% funded range, which again is exceptional, but you guys are greater than that. That's going to mean the money you have set aside will provide a greater benefit to reduce future contribution requirements for the district. For TRS, which is the teacher's pension, while it's only 40% funded, the vast majority of that burden is on the state and not on the district. It is over 98% of the obligation for TRS is on the state of Illinois, which is a large number for them, but it's not as significant for the district itself. So the exposure there is relatively limited despite that pension plan not being as well funded as IMRF. Where you are seeing in your financial statements a big impact is actually on the THIS, which is the Teacher Health Insurance System. That is $127.4 million liability on your entity-wide financial statements. It's similar to TRS, is not well funded. The difference there is that the district is about 45%, give or take, on the hook for those long-term costs. Now, you can't really do much about it through your contributions to TRS, who administers the program, because they determine what you contribute. So that liability is going to sit on the district financial statements, and there's not a whole lot you can do about that right now. The reason that liability is so large is because it's essentially an unfunded program. They do not have more than minimal asset buildup in that fund, whereas the pensions have assets that are being invested and put to use. THS does not. And as a result, that liability, both for your district and all districts in Illinois, is going to be large, and it's going to exist for a long time. So as you're seeing that, I point that out just because it does impact what those final bottom line numbers are, your net position. And unfortunately, as it's a state program, they dictate how you contribute and what you contribute to that plan. It's something you're just to account for when you see the financial information and evaluate things over time, as that number will fluctuate as years go on. I worry that it will continue to increase. So that's kind of just the highlights of the CAFR. There wasn't a lot of new stuff this year. Next year, there will be some big changes with the way your student activity accounts, which basically the money that is at the districts that's being used for student programs will be reported. That will be a relatively major change. Right now, it's presented separately, and you just see kind of what the balances are at the end of the year. Starting next year, those funds and that activity is going to be reported as part of your educational fund. So it's going to be a significant change because there is a fair amount of money running through. I think at the end of the year, about 2.7 million off the top of my head is what those accounts hold. And the activity throughout the year is not pennies. So that will start flowing through your numbers, and that's something to account for. You'll see a kind of a change in how that is reported going forward. But this year, there were no major changes that's going to skew how things look compared to prior years. So lastly, while we look at the numbers, obviously as part of our audit, we also do a very thorough review of your controls and your processes. That includes your major transaction cycles where high volume, high dollar value, such as your payroll processes, such as your standard cash disbursements, such as some of your local revenue collections like food service. We do a deep dive into the process and the controls, and we try to identify any potential risk areas or really just in general best practices that could be improved upon from what is there now. Even if things are really good, what have we seen elsewhere that can be done better? And in part report, we had no risks that we identified that are significant in nature. That would indicate that there's a potential for that system, that control process to be circumvented for any reason, whether it be through error or fraud. So that's great. In those high volume, high risk, if you will, processes where a lot of activity happens, that's where we want to look, because that's where something could, in theory, happen if there aren't good controls in place, and it could be hidden. Because you have solid foundation, solid controls across many different layers, the risk to the district is slim. It's very minimal because there's a great control process in place. There are also some organization-wide controls as well that we evaluate that also support those kind of activity functions that are strong in place. We provide recommendations if we see anything that's worthwhile there to the district. And it's just good to report that you guys essentially get a clean letter from us, and that is something you'll see in what's called the audit results letter. It's a new document this year. It's a new version of a document we've presented in the past. In the past, you've received a letter called the communication to those charged with governance. Now you're going to see a report called the audit results and insights letter. It is essentially the same content, just I think a more easily digestible format. It's not just a bunch of black and white text. There's also some resources that we want our boards just to be aware of are out there. Some articles, there's some links in the PDF version of the document that you can go out to our website and gives you some timely information, hopefully, and just not necessarily just related to current happenings like COVID, but to just things that we see our clients, some have had need for, some have found interesting. You may not, but we want to make sure it's available to you. So, feel free, if you have the electronic version, to click on the links. It'll take you to some resources that we have and we want to make available to you. Because you do engage us. We work for you as the board. We work with Lauren and Barb and their team on a day-to-day basis. You're the ones who engage us. So we report to you, and we want to make sure you have all the information available that you need to hopefully help you do your job better and feel like you have some additional resources from us as needed. Additionally related to that, as we work for you, I just always like to remind you on an annual basis that we are always available. If you have any questions, concerns, things you just want to throw by us, we are always there. That is our job. We work for you. We want to hear from you if there's something you'd like to discuss. Don't be shy. Barb knows about 15 ways to get a hold of me. I can't escape her even if I wanted to at this point. So, I say that in jest, but we really are here. It's not just, we don't come in just at the end of the fiscal year, look at your numbers for a couple of weeks and get out. We talk to Barb and Lauren throughout the course of the year about issues they're seeing to make sure they're accounting for things in a way that we agree with, and making sure we're all on the same page, and we keep them abreast of things that are going on so that they're aware and they can be prepared when things come down the pipeline. Similar to you as board members, we want to be available. So if anything ever were to arise or you have any questions, please don't hesitate. With that, if you guys have any questions, please feel free.
Questions or comments?
Thank you for the summary.
All right. Thank you very much, Mike.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.
All right. Roll call, please.
Sally, you're muted.
Mr. Young,
Aye.
Mr. Rosenblum,
Aye.
Mrs. Klimkowitz,
Aye.
Mr. Dombrowski,
Aye.
Mr. Creamer,
Aye.
Ms. Cavill,
Aye.
Mr. Lefevre.
Aye. All right, that will bring us to our operating fund balance for the period ending June 30, 2020. Just an information report. Any
Yeah,
questions?
This is in this section because The operating fund balance as well as the PAFR are directly connected to the CAFR that you just approved.
Any questions here? Okay, that will bring us to the 2019-2020 popular annual financial report of Board of Education funds. Any questions here?
I'd like to thank both not only our business office, but our communications department and our instructional office come together to put this format for our public. And it will go out to the community next week, informing them obviously of a high level view of our financials, as well as letting them know that the CAFR is also on the website.
Okay, that will bring us to bids for consideration buses. We have a suggested motion that the Board of Education award the business for buses for the Transportation Department to the lowest responsible bidder, Central States Bus Sales, in the amount of $1,193,090. Can someone please move that?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion?
Question. We sent out four requests for proposals. We got two back. One of them was a no bid. Is that usual? You send out four, get back one number? You ever get competitive bids for buses?
We do get competitive bids. I would say that in the propane world, there are less players that are in the marketplace. So I believe this is consistent with what we received last year as well.
So we got one bid last year as well?
I do believe so, yes.
Okay, thank you.
I should say we got one bid with numbers. I think we got a no bid as well, or so two responses.
Okay, thank you.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Rosenblum,
Aye.
Ms. Cavill,
Aye.
Mr. Dombrowski,
Aye.
Mr. Young,
Aye.
Mr. Kramer,
Aye.
Mrs. Klimkowitz,
Aye.
Mr. LaFever.
Aye. Next, we have student user fees as an introduction report. Any questions here? Okay, that will bring us to the District 211 Equity Team update. Here we have a suggested motion that the Board of Education authorize the superintendent to enter into an agreement with B. Young and Associates to provide professional services to Township High School District 211 to conduct an equity and cultural audit at a cost of $45,000. Can someone please move that?
So moved.
Second.
Discussion.
I thought that's what the task force was doing. I'm kind of surprised that we're looking to bring an outside party in at this point before we've completed the process and have come up with the recommendations. I think it appears that this would have potentially been a recommendation that would have come in the spring after the task force had completed their work. I'm a little concerned that you have someone who's coming in the middle of something else that's going on, and I'm not sure that with this operating concurrently, we would be able to get sort of an unbiased perspective from each entity.
Josh, I'll ask you to explain how this coincides with the equity team.
Sure. So if you're speaking about the District 211 equity team, the phase one was to look into and determine stakeholder engagement. And the team researched the scope of stakeholder engagement and also how it could be done and the need for valid and reliable feedback from our community. The recommendation of the District 211 equity team was to look at an outside organization that we could partner with to conduct that for us. And so that's why this is coming to you now, because it's the recommendation of the team. We plan to work together and we're going to collaborate with B. Young and Associates on how the process is done. And ultimately they will present the product and the recommendations of the outreach to the team at a time where the team will be putting together recommendations. So the team will, as B. Young and Associates are conducting their stakeholder outreach, The team will be in parallel with them, researching and analyzing the policies, procedures, and practices of our district, which will go hand in hand with the recommendations that we get from the outside organization.
No other questions? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Klimkowitz,
Aye.
Mr. Dombrowski,
Nay.
Mr. Creamer,
No.
Ms. Cavill,
Aye.
Mr. Rosenblum,
Aye, and I'm looking forward to their participation.
Mr. Young,
Aye.
Mr. Lefevre,
Aye. That will bring us to item G, establish time, place, and date of regular Board of Education meetings. We have a suggested motion that the Board of Education schedule regular board meetings in the G.A. McElroy Administration Center to begin at 6:30 p.m. for the purpose of entering closed session with the public portion of the board meetings beginning at 7:30 p.m. for Thursday, July 15, 2021, Thursday, August 19, 2021, Thursday, September 23, 2021, Thursday, October 21, 2021, Thursday, November 11, 2021, Thursday, December 9, 2021, Thursday, January 20, 2022, Thursday, February 17, 2022, Thursday, March 17, 2022, Thursday, April 7, 2022, Thursday, April 28, 2022, Thursday, May 12, 2022, Thursday, May 26, 2022, Thursday, June 16, 2022. Further, that the board secretary be directed to post proper notice. Can someone please move that?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Roll call.
Do we know if these scheduled dates conflict with any of our feeder districts? I know that lately a lot of parents have been attending the D54 meetings and then scrambling over to the D211 meetings. Are we going to be piggybacking on that again?
I would have to check on that. I don't know if they've approved their dates for the upcoming year.
Yeah, I thank you, Mr. Dombrowski, for that. I think there needs to be some coordination here to get the participation and parental interest in the board meetings. And when they do overlap, it's pretty hard. I know that there's a traditional third Thursday of the month meeting, but I'd be willing to move it to a Wednesday if 15 and 54 has their board meeting on a different day. I think it would be a good idea if we would coordinate the calendars.
Well, I think 15 has their meetings on Wednesday, Mr. Kramer.
Okay.
I propose that we approve this as presented and provide it to the other school districts so that they can consider it in making their schedules.
So we're driving their schedule instead of just talking to them.
Any other comments? Roll call, please.
Mr. Rosenblum,
Aye.
Mr. Creamer,
Aye.
Mrs. Klimkowitz,
Aye.
Mr. Young,
Aye.
Ms. Cavill,
Aye.
Mr. Dombrowski,
Aye.
Mr. Lefevre,
Aye. That will bring us to the sale of surplus school property. We have a suggested motion that the Board of Education authorize the sale of the following items: Body Master lateral shoulder raise machine, Cybex upright leg curl machine, Cybex triceps press machine, Cybex leg press machine, Cybex arm curl machine, Cybex leg extension machine, Cybex lat pull down machine, Hammer Strength unilateral leg press machine, Life Fitness abdominal crunch machine, Life Fitness shoulder press machine, Life Fitness multi-hip machine, Life Fitness incline chest press machine, Life Fitness seated row machine, Life Fitness upright chest press machine, a Coates 5065AX rim clamp tire changer, a gas-powered MB walk-behind broom, 2 Micro Rain MR32 traveling sprinkler systems, and a 2008 71-passenger bus by way of public sealed bid. Public auction site, or company trade-in. Can someone please move that, please?
So moved.
Second.
Any questions or comments here? Roll call.
Mr. Kramer,
Aye.
Ms. Cavill,
Aye.
Mr. Young,
Aye.
Mr. Dombrowski,
Aye.
Mr. Rosenblum,
Aye.
Mrs. Klimkowitz,
Aye.
Mr. LaFever,
Aye. That will bring us to potential topics for future discussion. Does anyone have anything? Okay, moving along to committee reports. First up is Northwest Suburban Special Education Organization. Mrs. Klimkowitz, please.
And we met on December 2nd. Our shining stars were two of our District 211 students that participate through NSSEO. A young man by the name of Sean, and he had aged out the week of December 2nd. Through the Doors program, he's got a customized employment, and he does volunteer at Sunrise Lake 2 days a week. So he's been very involved. There was a young lady, her name is Molly. She aged out in October. Also, she's done a lot of work at Sunrise, and she's attending Pursuits Day program. Dr. Hackett provided us with a fed and state update, and they are looking to return back January 4th to the hybrid plan. And they're reviewing staffing and the possibilities maybe of bringing some students back a little bit earlier. We did have a presentation about the goals that NSSEO has, and their second goal was the social emotional learning, more planned expanded training for staff, and also a review of the permanent rules in Illinois for the isolated timeout and restraints and timeout. If you go back to April of 2020, there were some Illinois rules in regards to the timeout restraints and the use of the timeout. And the reasons for those was to look at the imminent danger of serious physical harm to students or others, and to come up with a less restrictive and intrusive measures that have been tried and proven ineffective. So really taking a look at what works for the students and looking for the safety of the students and the staff. So they're working on that. Also, the foundation was not able to give out grants as they've done in the past. So they're using $10,000 to put together food baskets for the holidays, and also provide 125 families with the food baskets and the gift cards. And that is it from NSSEO.
Thank you. Next will be Ed Red and Mrs. Klimkowitz.
I was not able to attend the meeting. I don't know if Lauren was able to.
I was able to attend. I can give a brief update. There was a meeting last Friday in which 3 representatives spoke on the state of the budget for the state of Illinois, especially with particular interest in the shortfalls that are included in the budget with failed fair tax amendment. So we heard from Representative Will Davis, Dan Dittich, and Jennifer Gong-Gershwitz. All of them spoke from their own perspectives and some of the challenges that they are trying to work through, and basically provided an update that all things remain on the table. They did talk about trying to get to a balanced budget by the end of May, looking at everything from changes to the evidence-based funding model, possible impact to the categorical payments, things outside of particular funding for education, such as sales and service taxes to make up the shortfall in revenue. So they just went through that from their various perspectives, and their goal is to get to a balanced budget position by May.
Thank you. That will bring us to the Illinois Association of School Boards and Mr. Rosenblum.
Thank you very much. I had the opportunity to attend the recent IASB Virtual Summit on November 20th. And I know Mrs. Klimkowitz was also signed up to attend. And I got to tell you, the topics that were presented, the workshops, the opening keynote, the closing keynote, were all very, very dynamic, all related to issues facing school boards across our state every day, from racism to generational poverty to engaging the community, student mental health, student empowerment, and just all of the changes and the challenges that the school districts are experiencing right now in the environment that we find ourselves. It was a wonderful day full of great experts in those areas presenting us not only their information and expertise, but a lot of findings. There were participants from school districts. It was somewhat interactive. And for those of us that attended, the workshops are still available to review on the IASB website for another 10 days. And I was on there earlier today, and there are still people posting comments from their attendance that are great from an interactive and learning perspective. So it wasn't as great as previous in-person conferences because it lacked some of the networking capability, but from an informational perspective to help those of us who attended, I think have that information and help us be better board members, to me was really phenomenal. I'll turn it over to Anna if she has anything she'd like to add from her experience.
I think Mr. Rosenblum summed it up very well. It was very different of having a virtual conference. So it was informative, it was interesting. And I like the in-person much better, but it was good. Thank you.
Thank you. That will bring us to our announcements. We have quite a list for calendar items. And finally, our motions from closed session. First suggested motion is that the Board of Education accepts the retirement requests of Konstantina Kazakos, effective December 2023, according to the master contract of the District 211 Teachers Union. Janice Minogue, effective June 2021, consistent with the master contract of the District 211 United Support Staff. And Melanie Thomas, effective December 2021, according to the master contract of the District 211 Teachers Union. Could someone please move that?
So moved.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Young,
Aye.
Ms. Cavill,
Aye.
Mr. Rosenblum,
Aye.
Mrs. Klimkowitz,
Aye.
Mr. Dombrowski,
Aye.
Mr. Creamer,
Aye.
Mr. Lefevre,
Aye. Next, we have a suggested motion that employee Paul Nagel be suspended for 3 days without pay. Further, that the board secretary notify said employee in writing of this action by the Board of Education. Can someone please move that?
So moved.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Ms. Cavill,
Aye.
Mr. Dombrowski,
Aye.
Mr. Creamer,
Aye.
Mrs. Klimkowitz,
Aye.
Mr. Rosenblum,
Aye.
Mr. Young,
Aye.
Mr. Lefevre.
Aye. And if there is nothing further,
I just want to really quickly mention on the IASB website, there is, and this is for the many people who are still logged on from outside of the board and administration. The IASB website does have information for anyone who is interested in running for our school board with regards to the process, petition filing, key dates, and other information that would be very useful to anyone who is interested. So please, if you have an interest in doing that, go to the Illinois Association of School Boards website and gather that information. Thank you.
All right, we are adjourned.